Okay, the committee will come to order. Mary Beth, do you need a second? Testing for the echo.
That's better.
Okay, we're live. Today is May 20th, and this is the Joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. Will you please call the roll?
Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Landon.
Here.
Senator Salazar. Senator Schuler. Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Haroldson.
Here.
Representative Hunt. Representative Jennings.
Here.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Newsom. Representative Sweeney.
Here.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Co-Chairman Flitner.
Here.
Co-Chairman Ellis.
Okay, with that, members should have all received a copy of interim committee rules. If we don't take action on adopting any committee, the rules there are just default rules that will come into play. But at this time, if anyone wants to, it's completely appropriate if you'd like to suggest an amendment to those rules. Happy to entertain any motions right now or discussion. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just a question I'm new to TRW, and so in the past, have we voted as one body versus separate houses?
Thank you for the question. My understanding is that unless we take action, and this is all set per committee per year, so I don't know what the precedent was of the prior committee, but a quorum is the majority of members present. And then for any action we take, it just requires a majority of the members present, which is different than requiring a member or majority of senators and a majority of House members. That's certainly an option that we could discuss if you'd like. Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd make a motion that we would split that up, that we would each body, because whatever comes out of here will have to go to each body anyway. And so it doesn't make sense to me that we would work for a long period of time and then it won't make it past one chamber. So I'd make that motion.
Okay, it's been moved. Elisa, do we need a second for that? I think Representative Winters seconded it regardless. Discussion on the motion? Representative Flitner?
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I would just say that I will probably be voting no on that motion, just simply because I feel like we are the Joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. And I think that our work here is to be done as a joint committee. So, thank you.
Additional comments?
Madam Chairman.
Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I too would be a no vote because we are joint, and I think it's served well in other committees. And I'm sorry, now I brought the question on, Madam Chairman, but I just wanted to make sure that it was joint. So I'll be a no vote.
Okay, further discussion on the motion? Representative Jennings, did you want to speak one more time?
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chairman. So for 4 years, I served on judiciary and that functioned very well that way. We are the joint committee. And so I think it's important that whatever comes out of here comes out with a majority of each chamber, which gives it a much stronger position than, one chamber overrunning the other. And so I just, like I said, judiciary, the legalese guys, they all went for that. And like I said, I did not experience any problems with that. So.
Okay, calling for the question on the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The amendment has failed. Any other motions on our rules? Okay, seeing none. Elisa, do we need an affirmative motion to adopt the default rule, or?
Madam Chairman, no, but
Okay.
it's certainly the chairman's prerogative.
Do you have a preference, Madam
No, I
Co-Chair?
don't.
I think we don't need a motion. I think we'll just let the default rules stay in play. Okay, thank you, committee. I appreciate it. First up on our agenda, we have the Wyoming Office of Tourism, and we have Diane Schober, and she's got a member of her staff with her who she'll introduce. And so with that, committee members, I think for the efficiency, I really want to stay on track with our agenda today. We've got a lot of items to get through. I think it would make some good sense to allow Director Schober to go through all of the issues she'd like, and then we'll open it up for comment and then public comment after that. So with that, Director Schober, please identify yourself for the record and welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Diane Schober. I'm the Executive Director at the Wyoming Office of Tourism. And here with me today is Charles Lammers. Charles is our Creative Assets Manager, and he is the film office. This is it right here, the one-person show for the Wyoming Office of Tourism. Are we ready to share my screen? Are we okay with that, Mary Beth?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. So members of the committee, it's really an honor to be here with you today to talk about the Wyoming tourism industry. The tourism industry is one of the largest economies in Wyoming and certainly plays a very important role, not only in driving visitation for leisure travelers, but also impacts a variety of other industries and Wyoming's overall image out there in the public as a whole. Our office is responsible for promoting our state as an attractive travel destination. We focus primarily on the leisure traveler coming here for their vacation, but also by these advertising efforts, we enhance the public image of Wyoming as a dynamic place to live and work. And through the impact of travel, we're strengthening the economic position and providing opportunities for the people in each and every one of our local communities. Tourism touches all communities, large and small, all across the state, and is a great export economy for Wyoming. So I want to talk a little bit about just where we are as an industry overall as a whole. Certainly through the last year in 2020, the travel industry was brought to its knees, suffered some of the worst impacts, job loss greater than those in the Great Depression, repression and constriction of our industry much greater, 15 times greater than the 9/11 tragedy that happened. But the travel economy is in recovery. And although it may not look like it here, what I have for you today is just some indications of travel indicators across the United States. This is March to March of 19 compared to March of 21. Auto trips are down 14%, which is actually really, really good because Wyoming is a high automobile auto trip destination. Air passenger travel down 48%, which is substantially improved over where we were even a few months ago. Overseas travel down 87%. That certainly has impacts on Wyoming. We're looking forward to seeing some easing of some of the travel restrictions from international markets as we go through the summer. Hotel demand down 19% nationwide, and short-term rental, which are the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, HomeAway, they're actually up 1%. These are nationwide indicators. As we look at this, we see where we are today, but also the outlook for travel remains very, very promising. It's essential to recovery. There's a lot of pent-up demand, and certainly travel to wide open spaces is on the top of the minds of many, many consumers. In fact, if you just look briefly through these, 83.5% of Americans have tentative plans to travel in 21. Half of travelers are willing to vaccinate in order to have travel clearance. Certainly with the proliferation of more vaccinations, the safety of the travelers and consumer confidence is rising. Top trip characteristics: enjoying scenic beauty and visiting national parks as well as state parks, taking road trips bodes very well for our tourism product this summer. Historically, automobile travelers have outnumbered air travelers 5-1, but right now we're at 8-1 on auto travel over air, certainly. But I think if any of you have booked an airline ticket in the last month, you'll know that those flights that were $150 are now $350. So a lot of resumption back in air travel, which is good overall for the nation, for Wyoming. Unfortunately, some other sectors of the travel industry are not as quick to recover as the leisure segment. Business and corporate travel, certainly meeting in larger groups, I think we'll start to see a big uptick in that. slowly recovering in Q4 of this year. International travel, really, we're not expecting to see our pre-COVID levels of international travel until 24, late 23, 24, maybe even eking into 25. And so that just remains to be seen how different markets are responding to COVID and vaccinations and opening their economies. Wyoming's road to travel is a little bit more promising. And so you can see as you look at the bar chart across the top, this is travel spending from 2019, excuse me, compared to 2021. And as we've moved through these months, you can see that we're moving in the right direction. We're still down. The industry is still constricted here, not completely recovered, but certainly moving in the right direction. When you think about the cumulative losses from the travel industry that Wyoming alone has experienced, our differential is 1.4 billion. That's a substantial amount of money, even though we still had some good economic contributions. And our travel spending, March of 21 compared to March of 2019 is still down 17%. Overall, while the calendar year of 2020 contracted by 36% nationwide, we fared better than most. I think most of you, in conversations I've had with you, and you know that there were people out traveling in 2020, and Wyoming was certainly top of mind as travelers wanted to get out. And over the summer months when things seemed to be improving a little bit, Wyoming was top of mind. And my colleagues here from state parks will certainly, reaffirm that they were busier than ever with travelers and guests. But we still suffered from restrictions. It wasn't, as good a year. We were so primed for just a really, really fabulous year in 2020. And we're so optimistic. And then, like many other industries, had to deal with what had happened with COVID and the pandemic. So overall, our overnight visitor volume decreased by 25.7%. Travel spending was down 25.8%. Tax receipts were down 21.4%. And the direct loss of employment was approximately 4,000 jobs, of which 2,900 were in the leisure and hospitality sector alone. And so still, you're going to see some improvements even on those numbers as we look at those month to month since the end of December, but certainly some big losses there. I think they would have been greater had it not been for the collaborations that happened among all of the communities and the local lodging tax boards, other state agencies, and just, the work that we all did together to address what we were facing and how we could help visitors travel safely and keep Wyoming residents safe too. I think this is an important piece to when you think about the travel economy. So many times we think of it in just in terms of affecting lodging and restaurants, but the travel economy really covers and touches a variety of other industries. I think for you as policymakers and legislators, certainly you're looking at sales tax collections and what that means in terms of the overall health of the state of Wyoming. The green line represents 2019, the yellow line represents 2020. You can see the distribution of tax collections that were generated directly from travel, local sales to lodging tax, to motor fuels tax, to the state sales tax, the local portion, to state sales tax that the state gets to keep. So while down, significant contributors to the Wyoming sales tax collections. I brought this is actually, I think most of you probably see this from the Wyoming Division of Economic Analysis. They do their monthly insights report. And so when we look at industry sectors, the leisure and hospitality sector, April 21 versus April of 2020, obviously that was one of the worst months, April, May, and June last year that we experienced in our industry, but up 47% in tax collections. Leisure and hospitality, you can see, represents 11% of all tax collections, and just behind public administration, that's the and retail trade, that one of the largest contributors from the private sector into sales tax collections. Then I want to talk a little bit to you about travel jobs. I think, we're always, and when you think about the economy and economic opportunities, we're thinking about what are the revenue potentials that can be generated from an economy and in specific industries, but also what does it mean in terms of jobs? Many times the travel jobs, I really believe, are the unsung heroes of our state. This is the largest private sector industry in the state of Wyoming, representing last year about almost 29,000 jobs. Obviously, that was down a little bit, but that's still a substantial amount of employees making their living from anywhere from entry level all the way to the C-suite, to executives, owners, and business operators. Travel spending generated $935.2 million in direct payroll. Supports 7.3% of total employment in Wyoming. As I said, it's the largest private sector employer. Without travel and tourism jobs in 2020, the unemployment rate would have gone from 5.8% to 13.1% in Wyoming. These jobs also support higher education. When you need flexible schedules and you need to, you're pursuing either an associate's degree or an advanced degree of any sort, students look to the leisure and hospitality sector. So we are quickly supporting the higher education. And also this industry provides a fast track to management. So we're supporting and building a middle class in a way that many other industries can't do as quickly. So just again, important part of our overall job scenario. But also when we look at what does this mean from other industries? So when you think about direct jobs, those are jobs that are directly affiliated with travel, but then you also have induced and indirect. And so those could be purveyors who are providing supplies to the travel industry and then their employees. And when you think about all of these employees, the 28,000, 29,000 employees in this industry, they're buying homes, they're buying automobiles, they're serving as volunteers in our local communities. They're buying goods and services, they're banking, they're buying insurance, they're doing all the things that citizens do. So not only is it the largest number, but they're also contributing greatly. And when you can look at these breakouts, you see the accommodations and food services, obviously the primary supporter of jobs, but you move on down through arts, entertainment, retail, trade, professional services, government, transportation, construction, finance, and real estate. I mean, these are all being impacted by the travel economy. And so, like every industry, there are ripple effects. And this one certainly has a broad ripple effect across many industry segments in the state. Again, another just a pull from the Wyoming Insights from the Wyoming Division of Economic Analysis on the jobs. You can see that we've made even better improvement than what I had as the year-end totals, still down 1.1% from March to March. But representing right here, you can see that behind government, state and local government at 21% of the total job market, the next largest sector is 13% out of this leisure and hospitality industry. So now I want to visit with you just briefly about our marketing campaign and what it means to market Wyoming. As I said, we get to not only put inspirational messaging out there to inspire travel to Wyoming, but we're also working to build that strong public image of Wyoming as a great place in which to live and work. A squint chart, and those of you who are following along in your handouts or have looked at the presentation online, where I want to focus your attention is in the green line for recovery. And really I'm not going to go through the details of this, but what this chart represents is we have had different phases of how we've responded and how we're deploying messaging. Last year in March, we had launched our national campaign, primed again for a great summer. And on March 18th, we pressed pause on everything. And so, then we in May started back up with some other advertising, moved through the summer. What's nice about digital advertising, it allows you to press pause. You can stop and start, you can optimize and make sure things are working well. And as you would look into where we are today for the summer of 21, we're calling this our recovery campaign. And so there are things that we're looking at that would trigger this. We're spending roughly $4.6 million just on summer paid media. We're back into national markets. Now, last year, we were focusing more on regional and spot market and using a fully layered and integrated approach to our advertising campaign. Just a brief show and display demonstration of how we break out winter and summer spending. I mean, obviously, we are a warm weather market destination, and that really stems from just what product is available. With the exception of a high concentration of product in the northwest corner, There are bits and pieces certainly across the state of Wyoming for snowmobiling and other ski areas, but it doesn't represent as large a volume of 23 counties going full steam in the summer months. And so we look forward to bolstering our winter program back up again for this next winter. You can see from just the geography of where we cast our net. In 2020 is on the left side, and on 21, we are back with a national campaign as we were in 2019. Creative overview, I'm just showing you some examples of what would be digital display ads. And these right now are representing those ads that would be out there on a larger scale on a national level. When you're looking at national advertising, you're focusing predominantly on building brand awareness for Wyoming, putting Wyoming top of mind in the consumer's consideration set for where they want to vacation. You're going to see a lot of iconic locations in that level of branding. As we narrow down through that funnel, then you'll start to see more locales, more regional components of Wyoming. But certainly under the That's Why umbrella, we're leaning in hard to being the least populated state with the most wide open spaces and the most room for adventure. And so just you obviously can read these headlines. No state has fewer people and more space for adventure, room to start your next story, get in touch with the untouched, where decades might pass between footprints. We also segment our marketing to hit lifestyles, Western culture, adventure, family, road trippers. Technology and analytics provide you so much data that you can really start to laser in with some strategic precision about what markets you want to reach, and you can reach them with great accuracy. And again, here you see just a couple of examples of Western. Rarely has empty seemed fulfilling. Release yourself back into the wild. Under adventure, it's not the catch, it's the release. Find your center in the middle of nowhere. And then Why Responsibly was really born out of an evolution of a program that we've been working on with other state and federal partners about just how to recreate responsibly. And we've had that work done for several years, that we've worked with state parks and cultural resources and Game and Fish and other federal partners. But we added a component to it and raised it up into an actual marketing campaign last year. And it really was about safe communities as well, being mindful and traveling responsibly. And so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that later, but it's a broad sweeping campaign that has a lot of interest from consumers. But just some of the headlines: keep our lands legendary, stay wild and stay safe. And then the road trip market, which we talked to already about, that, what the consumers are looking at in automobile travel. Some of the road trip examples here: put the last year in your rearview mirror, stop spinning your wheels and hit the road. We've done a lot of partnerships and routes across the state of Wyoming. We've done a partnership with South Dakota on the Great American Road Trip from the Black to Yellow, the Black Hills, Mount Rushmore to Yellowstone, and just trying to leverage where we can maximize our dollars and get the greatest impact and reach travelers together. So I'm going to share with you just a couple of examples of our advertising that's playing right now. And so we're going to start with the radio. Maybe. Let's see here. Oh, we're starting with video. And oh dear, I'm so sad that you don't have sound on this one. It has some beautiful music and sound with it, but I think it's important, if you saw it, you saw the digital ad that was, it's not the catch, it's the release. And so this would be seen across connected TV, streaming television. It can also be seen across digital channels. It's on YouTube, but it's there, all of these layers. And I don't have time to show you all of the pieces and the layers in which we're going through, but these are all reinforcing that messaging. So if a consumer maybe isn't on a certain digital channel, but they're watching something on Hulu, for example, they may be able to then access this, or they may be reinforced with which is the radio spot that would be available to them on Pandora or Spotify or some of those other digital channels. And certainly it's not going to work for the digital space if we don't have audio here. So I'm going to move on through that. But I mentioned to you about road trips, and this is something I know has been really important to many legislators. who've asked about how are we moving people beyond these national icons and the things that are well known, like our national parks and national monuments. And so we, we know that that the national parks and national monuments are the inspiration of travel for at least about 60% of our travelers who are first-time travelers to the state. But then when you think about how are people getting here, they're coming by car, automobile, RV, motorcycle. So how do we start to inspire that travel along the routes to and from? How do you aggregate content and marketing so that you're assisting the consumer along the way? And then you're also introducing them to our beautiful communities and other great attractions and opportunities along the way for second and repeat visitors, because second and repeat visitors, many times they may still go to the national parks, but they're much more inclined to visit other destinations across Wyoming. So you have to work this like hand in glove, where you're showcasing all of it. And so we have the state allocated by four marketing segments: Salt to Stone, obviously the western side of the state, from taking that from the Great Salt Lake and that area up to Yellowstone. Black to Yellow, obviously the Black Hills, the Mount Rushmore across the northern tier of the state to Yellowstone. Park to Park is from Rocky Mountain National Park up to our parks, covers the swath through Cheyenne and up kind of through the central part of the state and in, and then Rockies to Tetons, goes a little bit further to the west and heads up. These are, as I said, just general ways in which to aggregate content and put things in a geospatial relationship for consumers. Wyoming's a big state, 100,000 square miles, and that's a lot of territory to cover. And if you're sitting in your home in Wichita Falls, Kansas, you may not know how all of this looks. Or if you're coming from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So you're trying to help consumers so that they can plan their travel in a way that supports our communities and also helps them move through the state. So one of the other things I wanted to just make sure that I brought to your attention today is just our co-op strategy. And that when I say co-op, cooperative programs where the state buys in at a big, broad branded level, and then we open up opportunities for partners to buy in at a discounted rate. And so we're utilizing the economies of scale when we're looking at co-op opportunities. It certainly increases the collective buying power and the share of voice in that market. So there's the Wyoming brand, and under it, there may be something from Evanston, and then another one from Visit Cheyenne to, Visit Casper. So you have, as you look through this, you're setting the overall awareness where there's a lot of marketing muscle, $4.6 million into the state brand, but you're also drawing eyes to all of our individual communities. And just showing you the pyramid of how this works. You've got the brand as the foundation, the co-op is the means and the vehicle by which to reach more. And then you're allowing your partners to access that larger travel audience through a collective buying power. Here are just some examples of our partners along the routes who are adding in That's Why as part of their own marketing and shared partnership. You see some examples here from Visit Gillette, Visit Cheyenne, the Wind River Visitors Council, Visit Casper, and the Converse County Tourism Board. What you will have, we'll send you a link that's live with all of the videos so that you can see it. And but I really wanted to show you these three, they're short videos, and we're working with a company called Bandwango. Is that right? Bandwango. And they're an online mobile app that can move people around the state, and then you get prizes. You might get like a Why Responsibly badge, or a That's Why sticker, or a water bottle, but it's all done through mobile devices, and it's showcasing different communities across the state. These are three fabulous videos. I will show them to you, but there will not be any sound with them. So you can see here the rewards passport. Senator Landon, I would assume you're dialed in closely on this one. So Representative Sweeney, you too. These are good demonstrations as to why audio enhances what you're seeing from a video perspective. We can't pay talent rights on this one. As it starts out with, this is down in Carbon County. So you can see that they're just short video. They're inspirational. They show adventure, they show outdoors. And so through, then a consumer clicks through and takes the next step in order to be able to follow in and unlock their adventure passports. But it's also really important because through that, we're also capturing leads on how we can remarket to consumers, because this is a strong indication of their intent to travel and their interest in Wyoming. So it's good for the State Office of Tourism, but also for partners to be able to leverage those consumers that are taking a keen interest in what we're doing. Social media, it's such a prevalent way in which to raise our voice and amplify what's out there. There's some really, really good stuff that's done through our partners. Here you can see from Chugwater to Du Bois, our friends down in Sweetwater County, Fremont Canyon, different things that we've done. The Why Responsibly campaign that I mentioned earlier is just around the mindful travel. It's a mission and values that resonate with travelers now more than ever. And so there is the Why Responsibly around adventure and camping. Also, this committee last summer had addressed some issues around litter and some of those things. That all falls within these buckets of adventuring responsibly. Wildlife safety, obviously, we always hear, people don't understand that these are actually wild animals in these wild places. And so working hard to do that. And then community responsibility, being responsible to cultures and communities and wherever folks are visiting. We're running an in-state campaign this summer asking Wyoming residents to join us in being ambassadors and helping our visitors understand how they can best recreate and enjoy Wyoming. And also just an engagement way for our residents to understand a little bit more about some of our opportunities that are out there. Some of our top coverage that we had last year through our public relations efforts, through Salt Lake Magazine, True West, Travel and Leisure, and the 50 best places to travel in 21. It's a big way, another way of amplifying the voice beyond paid media coverage is to work with large publications or large news outlets, journalists, to amplify that voice. In 21, we're going to be back doing a media mission. We didn't get to do any other than virtual desk sides last year, but we'll be doing in one of the top markets of Dallas. We're also going back into Mexico. Mexico is the largest inbound US market right now, has been throughout 2020. We have a lot of partners who are doing work there. And so we'll be looking at some media efforts around Mexico City and driving that market back in while we're waiting for other markets to open up. And also we'll have partners joining us. And then we're looking at some driving Wyoming coverage with unique opportunities. I'm scheduled to do a podcast with Condé Nast Traveler the first week of June. So there's just, a lot of this work that we're doing out there with these larger scale audiences. And that's how you really get, more attention. You hitch your wagon to someone who has a big, broad audience, and then you have a greater share of voice by doing so. In National Travel and Tourism Week, which was the first week of May, there was a great effort by our staff to reach out to get partners engaged. And this video, which I'm just going to skip through it rather quickly, but involves several mayors across Wyoming saying welcome to travelers and how much they appreciate and support the travel and tourism industry. And I apologize again that we don't have sound, but when you have a chance to look at it, I would encourage you to do so. It's only about a minute long, so we'll just let it run through. I'm going to be cognizant of my time. So they're I'm just going to zip on through this because you can't hear what they're saying, but it was just a nice way in which to represent people from all across the state of Wyoming. And the mayors who weren't able to join us, all cities were given the invitation. it just, we're trying to turn it around quickly and it doesn't always work for everyone. These two videos are actually examples of One Perfect Day. We had asked for Travel and Tourism Week for our communities across Wyoming to present One Perfect Day. If you were going to be in that area, what would you do as a traveler? And again, you won't have the audio to go with it, but just an example of what Sweetwater Travel and Tourism put together on how to spend a perfect day in Wyoming. I think you'll recognize some of these places as you've traveled through there, through Green River and Rock Springs. They just did a really good job of just identifying the attractions and how you would spend that day if you were there, and understanding the reason why it's so important that locals develop these, because they understand the distance between places. And so, how people would automatically, the natural flows, if you were going to visit these areas, like what would you do? And then the city of Evanston also has a really nice video too that they've put together for the Uinta County area. It's a beautiful shot. So much of our work, while we're paid media advertising, is about getting awareness for Wyoming. The minute you start to distill down from that, it's all about the locations and the experiences across Wyoming. Partner development, we have a program called Why Best. It's out working with local lodging tax boards on strategic development, tourism, community development. We've had 12 counties who've completed the first stages, and about 6 more set up for, we've got a couple going on this summer. And so you'll see more and more feedback on this as local communities are taking advantage of these opportunities. One other thing I wanted to just highlight for you was in the fall of 2020, the Wyoming Office of Tourism, the Wyoming Business Council, and the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services joined together in a partnership to capture the outward migration of folks from urban areas into more remote and rural areas. It was titled Why Relocate, under the umbrella of That's Why, leading with lifestyle and tourism type messaging. But also we were targeted specifically through people who were looking to relocate, entrepreneurs and remote workers. We were anticipating about 1,200 leads. We got over 3,000 people actually going in, entering their names and their contact information, saying, I want more information about Wyoming. And so all of those leads went into through the Wyoming Business Council. They sorted them out by, these are business recruitment leads. These are people looking for jobs. Those went to workforce services. And then the tourism leads stayed with us. And so we were able to garner, but some really good qualified leads. In fact, overwhelmed the capacity of what workforce services could do based in that time frame that we did it. So it was a really great campaign. You can see a couple of examples here of remote jobs are more popular than ever. Take being remote to the next level by relocating to Wyoming. Spend less, earn more, adventure most. Take working remotely to the next level by relocating to Wyoming. Plant your roots where they have room to grow in our wide open spaces. Spend less, earn more, adventure most. Again, these were very targeted because we knew that there was an interest in Wyoming regardless, but you can take what you get or you can go after what you want. And marketing can really do that. You can identify and qualify who you want that audience to be, and you adjust your media appropriately so that you can laser in. We'll be looking at doing Why Relocate 2.0 again this year. We just had a meeting on it yesterday. And so look for more of this to come in a partnership with the 3 agencies. Just quickly on our international strategy, we're looking for the 2 top markets to return the quickest as Canada and Mexico. Brand USA, which is the United States Tourism Office, is still doing a lot of work for inspiration to keep the US top of mind in international markets. And the Great American West, which is our 5-state cooperative, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Idaho. We've been doing a lot of webinars and inspirational travel to reps in 5 international European markets, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and the Benelux countries, which are the Netherlands. And then we, as the Office of Tourism, suspended our activities in Australia this last year just because of budget reductions, but we hope to bring that back in the next year. And this is a really beautiful story that was done through On Wyoming in winter through Brand USA and was run across all of their channels in markets. It actually starts out with a woman from Brazil speaking Portuguese because there's not sound. It's not going to have the same meaning. And because of time, I'm going to move through this, but certainly something worthy of you taking a look at. And it also received, it's up for nomination for an award through the Hospitality and Management Advertising Association for its content and inspirational visuals. So you'll be able to see just a few minutes of the beginning of it, of snowshoeing, and it's a really, really beautiful video. I hope you take the time to look at it. And then also Carola, who represents us, she's in Munich, is just sharing the desire from the German market to return to travel and to come back to the great American West. They just really are hungry for this. Our strategy going forward, as we look at what's ahead of us, I know Representative Sweeney, you had asked about the change in when the statewide lodging tax went into effect. And that actually went into effect on January 1st of 2021. For those of you who may not remember, the legislature passed a 3% statewide lodging tax. 80% would go to fund the Office of Tourism, and 20% would go into a project and reserve account. And so as we look at an opportunity to leverage those funds, there are many things on our horizons that we're looking at. Some of the things I've introduced to you, we're anxious to move forward on, but there are a variety of other things that we're looking at as well. We'll be looking to deepen our collaborations to address gaps in the industry. Marketing is only one ingredient of growing the tourism economy. Workforce is a huge component of this. You know, not only the people who are employed, but there's a shortage in this industry as well. We're also looking at product development. We're relying on partners like state parks and their product development, what Game and Fish can do, what our national parks will do, but also what's the private sector doing to address some of these needs in our gaps, even in transportation. We also see our role is to lead the industry with sound destination management practices. We, as a rule, have been a marketing entity, but we're casting a wider net to work with local communities, Main Street programs. How do we have livable communities that work for all of Wyoming and all industries? Because it turns out residents and visitors like to do the same things. And you don't have all of the amenities in communities across Wyoming if you didn't have a visitor economy. Even in Cheyenne, are one of our largest cities, if it weren't for the visitor economy, we would not have all of the amenities here. We just simply don't have the population to support it. We have to rely on that visitor. And then we'll be elevating the value of the visitor economy through grassroots advocacy. I think a lot of people don't understand. It's invisible sometimes, you know, because you don't always know who's there and are they visitors. And so we want to make sure that we're listening and working with local communities and understanding where the value of this industry is.
And Director Schober, I know I said that we'd go through all the topics, but God bless, you've just been talking. And so I wanted to give you a chance to catch your breath. Is now a good breaking point for committee members to ask questions before we start talking about the film industry incentives?
Madam Chairman, certainly.
Is that, unless you had more you wanted to wrap up on the marketing?
No, Madam Chairman and members of the committee, I was ready to move into the Wyoming Film Production Incentive. And so I'd love to answer questions if you have them about marketing, and then we'll switch topics.
That sounds great. All right, committee members, Representative Salazar, or excuse me, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director. Can you talk to me about my neck of the woods, Du Bois? You know, we've got Ramshorn Mountain. It's the cowboy town. We've got the incredible culture of the tribal communities in Fremont, the Wind River Basin. Tell me on the marketing and what you're doing in that regard. Thanks.
Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Senator Salazar, thank you for the question. So we're working in partnership with your Wind River Visitors Council. I just had a meeting last week with the new director there. Helen, and great to meet her. And we're looking forward to establishing this close working relationship with her as we had with Paula McCormick when she was in that position. The Wind River Visitors Council is a proactive partner in our cooperative opportunities. You would see, I mean, what I've shown you today is only a thimble of the work that we are doing in terms of marketing and messaging. But you would see the Wind River Visitors Council positioned in almost every single one of the co-op opportunities that we offer. They, as I said, are a proactive partner. The experiences of, what's available in that country, certainly from a Native standpoint, a Native American experience where there is an interest in, working closely with both the Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Arapaho tribes, because we want to make sure that it's coming from their voice. But we have a lot of strong relationships in that area. And we were super excited about the military museum opening. I think that's just another great attraction. And so you have a lot of really, really strong assets in that area.
Follow-up question, Senator
Yeah,
Salazar?
thank you, Madam Chair. So is that going to be part of your marketing throughout the United States, bringing people into Wyoming? I actually looked through the last couple of years of your YouTube presentations, and I saw Devil's Tower, I saw Yellowstone, but I think I would encourage you to take a look at a stronger marketing toward that whole Fremont area. Not only the military museum, but Du Bois, which is becoming a gateway for Yellowstone, overflowing from what's happening in Jackson. I would encourage you to take a look at that as far as a national marketing campaign. Thanks.
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman and Senator Salazar. And I would love to be able to just visit with you and show you many of the ways in which we are showcasing that area. And it is the responsibility of the Office of Tourism to create an awareness for Wyoming. And then the next step in that funnel is to work with all of our partners across the state to draw attention to the experiences that are there. Many of the experiences that we're showcasing, what we're trying to do is you might be able to, like fly fishing. You can do it in so many areas of Wyoming. And so we want to showcase that as an experience. And then the consumer we can guide them to all the variety of places where they could do that versus focusing on one locale. But in the big branded national advertising, our fundamental rule of marketing is to lead with our hooks. And so we're leading with the things where there's the greatest awareness, so the marketing can work well. And I think that's then what the Wind River Visitors Council does, and how we can tie into what's happening in your area is leading them with the hooks that are there. And you certainly do. Du Bois is just it's the gateway to the gateway, is what I say. You're right there positioned well for a lot of travelers. So I look forward to that, and I'll be happy to follow up with you in a much deeper conversation.
Further questions? Senator Grew?
Sure. Good morning, Diane. Kind of leading off of the good senator's question. I think, isn't that kind of the big drive about we expand the lodging tax, put a lot of money into these individual communities, let them and work with them to try to highlight what's there, each one, because each one does have their own unique, great places to go, and they each have their own story. And then we build on that from the statewide level. You give them guidance so they can help do that on their own, and then we all work together. My question is, as we keep, how's it going? I heard you talk about the interface with workforce services and the Wyoming Business Council, but I think is great. One of the ones we talked about a couple of years ago when I was on this committee is, I see my friends back there, Game and Fish and the state parks, and to make sure that when someone comes in and hits on your website that says fishing, that we make sure that gets over to Game and Fish, so then they can get a little tag back and say, by the way, fishing season opens, and then you can get or hunting season and what areas, so we can direct people to where we want them to go and where we want them to go. And same with state parks, our underutilized parks in great places in other communities that we want to send them. How's that coming as far as working together?
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman, Senator Grew, thanks for the question. And yes, I could have spent all day with you and had all kinds of information for you. But we, a few years ago now have transactional components on many of our sites where, to the point that the senator made, if you are looking at fishing, there's a link that goes directly to Wyoming Game and Fish. So you can buy your license right there. You can start to access other areas. Even through all of our parks, or if you want to go camping, there are direct links to make those reservations so that the consumer is moving through this and they don't have to go back and go to a different website, but there's direct links. In fact, by design, we set this up with the other agencies. And then I believe that Director Westby is going to go through this today. I don't want to steal his thunder on a joint effort that we have with outdoor recreation, which includes all of us as entities on a map, on a digital map that is wonderful from a tourism marketing perspective, but also is a great aggregator of all kinds of outdoor recreation opportunities and businesses across Wyoming. And so that was something that their department brought forth to you as a body of the legislature a few years ago. And in partnership, we knew there would be economies of scale if we worked together on it. We're doing all the marketing to drive the eyeballs to that particular Wonder Map, and you would see it woven in throughout the website, travelwyoming.com, and showcases a variety of other businesses too. That's just one example of a great piece of work that's done in collaboration among partners and state agencies.
Okay, further questions? Senator Schuler, then Senator Landon, then Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Actually, I had a couple of questions, but I think you may have answered one of them. First of all, I'm really glad to see that you've taken advantage of the relocate. I'm kind of wondering what the 2.0 might entail, but I think we're getting a lot of folks moving to Wyoming, and I think, obviously the marketing is helping. But the question I had actually was wondering if you guys, it sounds like, you are collaborating a bit with state parks, but we're starting to get a group in our neck of the woods that are trying to really take advantage of the outdoor trails with ATVs and OHVs and that sort of thing. Wondered if you guys had any ideas for marketing that particular thing.
Director Schober.
Senator Ellis and Senator Schuler, yeah, big part of our marketing. And there's, I don't know if it was in any of the videos that we showed here today. Charles is, as our creative assets manager, he also is our videographer. He goes out and shoots a lot of content and stories. And so we have a big plan for what we'll be shooting this summer. But working in conjunction with, where do we have gaps? Do we have that kind of content? Do we need to go out and get it and produce it? Do our partners already have it available? Is it something, that we can move through? So I think anytime we start to see surges in different types of activities, we want to showcase it, but we also want to be sure that it is accessible for the visitor. So you can't, if we don't have ways in which they can access that, then sometimes it's difficult. In one of the gaps that we're talking about here is service providers. Visitors come to Wyoming, they want to go horseback riding, they want to go river rafting, they want to go fly fishing, they want to go biking. There's a variety of things, sightseeing. They want to do a lot of stuff. They want to go to a museum, but they do not come with a horse trailer, a horse, a saddle, boots, shaft, hay, feed, drift boat, fly rod, waders, bike, helmet, spotting, big telescopes. They don't have all of this equipment with them. And so that's where places like a Jackson or Cody have a large concentration of service providers. Other communities have varying levels of service providers where the consumer can go and can do this. But the more ways in which we can provide this, where it's turnkey for visitors, is good for communities, it's good for business development, and visitors will stay overnight longer. And so, even to your point, Senator, is you see these surges in outdoor recreation, and that's part of the work that we're doing with not only Why Relocate in the Business Council, but with state parks and Game and Fish, is how do we build this outdoor recreation economy to meet the people that are coming here? And that's a big gap in it that we need to address. We have the raw product. I mean, we know we have such a beautiful raw outdoor product, but we have to be able to, if we want to monetize that, is to be able to fill some of those gaps.
Alrighty, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And to pick up on the good senator's question, we spent yesterday a little bit of time on the southwest part of the state. The Transportation Committee is going to be working with the folks at WYDOT on this trail system. As it turns out, we're going to need some statutory change in order to allow access to some of those road rights of way. And so I just throw that out there so that our travel committee can maybe put that in the back pocket and hopefully be ready to maybe support that effort especially along an interstate highway. We've got to be careful on the way we do it, be safe and all of those things, but that would provide the access to the trail system that they're trying to develop in the Southwest. And that's a really exciting project. I mean, I think that's got amazing potential, knowing the explosion in outdoor recreational vehicle use. I think they're really onto something, Madam Chairman. And so I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator Landon. Before Director Schober responds, the Southwest Wyoming Off-Road Trails, or the SWAT group, they have reached out to me and I believe Representative Flitner. So we've earmarked that as maybe something we can explore more in greater detail in a future meeting. We didn't feel prepared to put it on the agenda for this one. So you can be brief with your response, but I think that's on our radar. There's just only so much we can discuss today and tomorrow. So.
Madam Chairman, I did have a question. And
Oh, yes,
it's
Senator Landon.
very elementary. Sorry, but I love the product and thank you for the presentation, Director Schober. Is there a way to make any of these visuals from a retail standpoint available to people? Is there a way to get a poster, for example?
Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Senator Landon, just to briefly touch, I should have mentioned the Department of Transportation. We're working closely with them on a lot of accessibility, and we see that there's gaps in that area for outdoor recreation.
No problem.
The Office of Tourism we're in the process right now of finalizing a contract for a trademark, a royalty agreement with Bighorn Design out of Sheridan to produce soft goods and be our retailer for That's Why product and product extension. We also have an agreement with JB's Wild Wyoming. They were based out of Lander, I believe, for some of the old retro campaigns around posters. But the current That's Why store will be launched as soon as the Attorney General signs off on the contract. And so working with the Wyoming company, they're in the retail business. We don't have to be out any upfront expense for retail inventory, and it's just a royalty share on it. So we'll make sure that as soon as the That's Why store opens, that we get you the link and you can start shopping away and getting your That's Why goods.
Thank you, Director. I'll just leave a blank wall up at Du Bois Cabin for the release poster. Love that poster. So thank you.
And thank you. I'm sure the Attorney General's office is listening. So note that. Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, and me being new to the committee, I've never really had a chance to ask this, but you touched on the outreach and the efforts to connect with European visitors. And I know that when I was over in Europe 15 years ago, that there's a large segment of the population that's just really fascinated with the American West and the history and culture and so forth. But I guess more generally, my first question is, are there other parts of the world that share that? And secondly, speaking to Europe and I guess other parts of the world as well, in the post-pandemic world, what challenges are there going to be to revitalize that, just from a logistical standpoint and from the whatever pending requirement there will be out of the European Union or any other part of the world for vaccine passports, so on and so forth?
Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Representative Hunt. So there's a couple of things in that. Certainly the markets themselves are changing. But the UK has been, for as long as I've been in this business, and it's a long time, has been the leading inbound country for travel into the United States, beyond Canada and Mexico. And we're talking about long haul overseas travel. And so I know a lot of people, we think that China was such a large import or inbound market, but it wasn't to the level that some of those European countries were. And then but we certainly had a large influx of Chinese visitors into Wyoming and markets from all around the world, from South America, Europe, North America, Asia Pacific, India, just a lot of travelers. And so the markets are very, very different. And what we're relying on is where basically it will be up to US Customs and Borders and Homeland Security in how markets and travelers can come into the United States. It also will depend on what those countries are doing in terms of allowing their residents to leave and travel. This morning, I heard on the news before I got here that travelers coming into the United States, and I believe it was maybe the US folks coming back in would have to take a test within 3 days of travel and then test again within 5 days of arrival in the United States that they were back in with COVID negative tests. And so, we're just watching and monitoring, and we're relying on the US Travel Association, which is the broad association of the travel industry. It represents airlines and hotels and restaurants and the Disneys of the world and states like Wyoming and national parks to really monitor that and urging Congress to look at ways of opening our borders and encouraging that international return, because they're so important. International visitors make up such a large portion of travel in the shoulder seasons. And so, they have a tendency to stay longer, spend more. They may be less in volume of visitors, but their economic value, the value of that international traveler is really important to us. As I said, we had efforts in Australia, but we suspended that. We hope that as that country comes back, they're great for winter travelers. The Australians love to come to Wyoming in the winter. And so, we just will continue to see where there's the ability to travel. We'll continue to work as our cooperative, for how we can leverage these markets. But we also see this as an opportunity to increase our brand positioning, because just like Americans, international visitors are anxious to go to places that have wide open spaces and a lot of great outdoors, and that has Wyoming written all over it.
Okay. Questions? We have a Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Director Schober, for your presentation. Can you speak a little bit to the closed rest areas? That's had a big impact, I know, on our traveler, a big inconvenience and a big inconvenience on us that travel. So if you could speak a little bit to that.
Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Representative Newsom, we were pleased to be able to work with the Department of Transportation to come up with a solution for bringing those rest areas back online this summer. There were 10 that were closed last year. 9 came back online. The reason why the 10th one didn't is it's undergoing some construction with its water well and whatever. But yeah, we were able to look at how we could access federal funding. Could we go through ways of CARES Act or EDA grants or ARP? And so we provided the justification and the need for travel and how those work with, I know a lot of people, you think of a rest area, you think of it as a pit stop, right? That you need to stop and use it as a bathroom break. But we also know from rest areas that are co-located with welcome centers and information centers, that people will spend, they will increase their travel by a half day in Wyoming. And so it's really important when you want to extend that length of stay. And they are sometimes in the most remote of places. And so people are looking for information. Communities embrace them. In Chugwater, their economic development committee in their community. I know you're fully aware of this, right? Representative Haraldson, is they actually have volunteers who go out and work at that rest area in order to get people to go downtown and into Chugwater or other places in Platte County. And so beyond that being just that relief spot on the road, they do serve a greater good to the visitor economy. And certainly with Governor Gordon's team, he encouraged us to find a way to work together to make that happen, and we were pleased to do so. And I believe that they're opening this weekend. I don't want to overstep on YDOT's plan, but I believe that was the plan, that they would be open this weekend.
Okay. Further questions for Director Schober? Co-Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Director Schober, thank you. I appreciate the presentation. couple things. I want to thank you for the work that you do locally with our local economic development groups and chambers. You provided them a lot of help and direction and guidance and suggestions. So thank you for working with everybody, especially in our smaller communities that don't really have, you know, a deep connection to you and to your office. And then also I was wondering, I love your brand campaign. Those little vignettes I think are so effective and they're beautiful. Do you build those in-house or do you have an agency outside of your department that does those?
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, it's a mix. So on the big brand ones, I believe that you're familiar with, like the ones that have Wyoming here, those that have moved us so emotionally at times together. Those are done through our ad agency, but a lot of the other work is done through Charles. He goes out, and we also contract with local production entities in Wyoming to produce some of those. We also are setting up a content list for this summer. I think you have several that you're planning to do for this summer to go out and shoot content videos around the state. So we're looking at places that are, do we not have a lot of visual assets in a certain area? And then also what kind of deep stories will work. And when they work the best is when they have crossover for a lot of different, they can cover a lot of different pieces. So I would, the example would be Queen Bee Honey in Level. Great story. It opens up when he's like, we have, 11 billion employees and only 7 of them are human. And so, then it shows the bees. And so it goes through a great story there, but it's also family. It's a family business. He does a great job, but it also is the, it's a business that has utilized some of the other programs through the Wyoming Business Council or other things. A lot of our breweries, we've done many of the same things. And that's the work that Charles gets to have fun doing, is he gets to go out and go to all the places around the state. Certainly, maybe Charles, if you could just mention, if you would, introduce yourself and some of the places that you're headed to this summer.
Sure. Again, I'm Charles Lammers. I'm the Creative Assets Manager for the Wyoming Office of Tourism. And just give you a little bit of a tip on where we're going. Actually, next week, I'm going to be covering the entire eastern part of the state for a 360-degree video and interactive tour production. That includes pretty much every county from Albany all the way up to Crook. And then beyond that, we're going to try to do a production in Southwest Wyoming for photography. And then in addition to that, covering additional parts of the state with a campaign for our wide drive segment. So it's going to be a pretty busy summer for us.
Awesome. Any more questions from the committee? Alrighty, seeing none, well, let's move on to the, okay. And I just want to remind committee members, it's 9:22. We have a few other agenda items, and I know some committee members or some committees like to go on. I'm just going to be very blunt with you. I would love to stick to the schedule. So we're going to keep moving. Another point before we continue, I know we get asked this question all the time, if we prefer chairwoman, madam chair. I think my co-chair and I are very comfortable with just about anything as long as you make an effort. So committee members, if you say Chairman Ellis, I'm not going to yell at you or anything like that. So just as long as we're, just for everyone in the room, you don't need to worry so much. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director Schoberg, one idea you mentioned about the fact that there's no lack of raw materials in this country. We're in a beautiful state, you guys. One of the things that I'm finding though is we understand that tourism is a huge part of our economy, but I think the average person doesn't. The average person, so I'm just going to say Platte County, the average person's like, man, everyone's coming here. We don't want them here because it's our county. But you don't realize that's our money in our county. We don't have minerals in our county. It's our money. And so I think where's the point where I don't know, it's an idea for a marketing campaign, a culture change campaign to say, you know what, let's grab a hold of this natural asset that is our land. There's no float company on the Platte River between Wendover and Guernsey. There could be, let's start getting these ideas into people's heads of, you know what, let's view this as an asset instead of a liability. And I don't know, is there anything you're doing that might be working in the realm of that culture change for the actual, the people in the state and their view towards the tourism market?
Director Schober, I would actually say probably Senator Guru could almost answer that question for you. There's a different mindset, I think, if you grow up in Teton County, but Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Representative Harrelson, you are a great example of being an ambassador of the industry. And that's really what it takes is understanding the value of the industry first and foremost, You can grow and develop this without changing our lifestyle or our legacies that are here. It's an export economy. So by very definition, non-residents coming here and buying goods and services and leaving. And just the things that, to capture on how we can continue to grow and build. The responsibility doesn't sit just with the Wyoming Office of Tourism. It sits with all Wyoming residents. It sits with government. It sits with local communities. It sits with organizations. But it certainly, we see it as a primary responsibility. And even to the point of the last bullet on the slide that's up right now, is how do we help the local or the layperson understand that this is good value and that you can monetize this in a way that doesn't, the locals might say, well, there's my favorite fishing spot, but I'll leave that to Director Nesvik to make sure that he's managing public access and whatnot. But certainly it's all of us. And as we look forward and we see where are Wyoming's opportunities, we're on the precipice of some great opportunities right now. I think the last year showed us the value of the industry in a greater way. It was one of Wyoming's saving graces in terms of economy. And we are rich with opportunity in every single county across the state of Wyoming. Our office is, as I said, we're expanding more into destination management. We're doing these programs that Chairman Flitner referred to, Why Best. We've been in many of your communities and working with your local tourism leaders to help them refine their tourism marketing skills, understanding their destination best practices. And so it will just be a continued collective effort. But you'll hear more about, I think, these as plans and strategies, as we're in the process of developing our strategic plan for the next biennium and where we'll take all of that.
Alrighty. Wyoming tourism in the classroom. There's an idea. Alrighty, Director Schober, if you want to continue on talking about the film incentive issue.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. You have before you a white paper referring to some of the nuances of this particular information. There's been a lot of requests for us to our office to take a look at the Wyoming Film Incentive. This was a program that was enacted in 2007 and then sunset in 2018. And so as we are looking at revitalization of economies around the state, we wanted to bring this to your attention based on a lot of folks across the state of Wyoming who have brought this to our attention. And certainly if it's something that you should decide that you'd like to move forward with, we can have more, encourage more of those amongst the public to come in and share their views with you. But just to give you a quick rundown of this is a film incentive is important in terms of non-resident production. You're bringing in companies to do their work here. They're hiring crew. They're buying goods and services from lumber to hotel rooms to caterers to a variety of things when they're on site. And then they're also contributing to our economy by tax contributions through this. And then certainly from the standpoint of tourism, this is another avenue of putting our product out on the big screen, the small screen, the handheld screen for people to see a location. And historically, we know that there's a lot of great attention that comes to a destination when the location is part of the storyline too. And in order to have a film incentive program, you have to have three things that would happen with it. It has to serve a public purpose. You have to have adequate consideration to the state, and you have to have statutory authority. And in 2007, and all the work that we did with the then joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee, working with the attorneys at the Legislative Service Office and the Attorney General's office, worked hard to move through those first two. Does it serve a public purpose? And is it adequate consideration? The public purpose is serving the tourism, the broader visuals of Wyoming, accessing people. And then the consideration is, the jobs and the economic impacts. And so those have already been vetted. You would not have to do that work again if you want to rely on the work that was done in 2007 that said that this would be an allowable expenditure. What you do need is statutory authority. And that's where if you should decide that this would be something that you would have an interest in, to move forward, we would need the statutory authority to do it in order to meet the constitutional components that are designed in 16.6. So that really is the question before you. Just on the white paper, and I want to acknowledge Charles and the work that he does as our film office. But put together this from examples of where the public purpose is, economic development, jobs, the adequate consideration, are all of the expanded exposures and the visibility. We would have to spend millions and millions of dollars in paid media advertising to get that type of exposure that you can get through certain types of filming. There's a brief review of the past legislation. It was, renewed. It had a sunset on it in the first components. Started out with $1 million appropriation. And then we had requirements, obviously, of what a film company would need to do. Obviously, the benefits of growing local economies, the eyes on Wyoming, the marketing value were very, very important. Jobs for residents, literally hundreds of jobs. And then just meeting the demand in 2020 alone, there were over 100 filming inquiries. And Charles is going to talk to you a little bit more about that. What I would like to have you just as you're considering this is to look at, there's not an opportunity for apples to apples in this world of film incentives, because many of the film incentives that are out there are based on tax credits. Maybe it's an employer tax credit or a tax exemption in some other areas. Wyoming's tax base is so low, we don't have many of those taxes to even offer as a credit that other states would. And so Wyoming's program, as it was established before, it was a rebate on qualified expenditures. So the process that would happen through a film incentive is an interested production company would contact our office if they decided that they wanted to film here through the work that Charles or local communities would have done. Then they would go, they would fill out the application and they would say, this is our estimated expenditure in Wyoming. And they had a threshold, it was $200,000 or greater. And then that would went before a review committee made up of some members of the tourism board, of Wyoming's film industry, some of the, and staff. And then there was a recommendation. Yes, this looks like a good qualified expenditure. We believe that it could happen. The company comes in, they film on location, they wrap, and then they have to put forth sometimes binders this thick of all of their qualified expenditures, driver's license proving Wyoming residency of their crew, all of their receipts. That is then audited through our own team. It goes through another audit and then is reviewed through the auditor's office. And only once that's all approved, then does the company receive their rebate. And so there's no risk to the state of Wyoming until the production has wrapped and it has been fully vetted and qualified for those expenditures. And so that would be, if you were to take a look at this, is to take those same kinds of things into consideration. If I may, Madam Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to Charles. He can just give you an update on what happened that was so different in the last year and the interest in Wyoming.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you,
Sounds good,
Madam Chairman and members of the committee.
Yep, Mr. Lammers.
Thank you. The past year has been a roller coaster when it comes to the film industry, not just for Wyoming, but the entire world. Along with every other industry in the world, COVID kind of turned things upside down, and we saw a lot of benefit from it, actually. What happened was we ended up seeing our film inquiries explode pretty much. We went from 2019 total of 79 for the year to over 160 for 2020. Of those, 152 were between March and December. So it shows that in the film industry, a lot of people that were filming in New York, LA, Alberta, you name it, they're looking for alternatives to where they would normally film. A lot of people that reached out to me are location managers and producers, and a lot of them like Wyoming because not only are we the state that's been socially distancing since 1890, we're also the place with the landscapes that are already in the backdrop, which means they don't have to set up sets. They just get to use the landscape that's behind everything else. The most common and deal-breaking question that I received is, does Wyoming have a film incentive? A lot of the time when I say no, they'll end the call right there. So it makes it really hard to try to sell a state that doesn't have that incentive when a lot of our surrounding states do have an incentive. These days, these location managers are given a budget that's a lot smaller than it used to be. So they're almost looking for the most affordable place first, or a place that will work with them. So a lot of the times when we don't have that, they'll just hang up the phone right then and there. Some of the location managers that we've worked with, though, have said that Wyoming has been sought after not only because of the landscapes and the ability to move in easily and set up, but also because of our willingness to work with them. Some of the communities that we've had productions come to, such as Casper last summer with Street Outlaws Fastest in America, they said that they don't see that kind of thing in other states. They don't see people that are willing to come together to help them achieve their goals, and especially for the budget that they're willing to work with. In addition to that, just wanted to share that another opportunity that people see here is that we have some infrastructure that people are already willing to film at. And these aren't just Westerns. A lot of action movies, they'll inquire about Wyoming. For instance, we had one that wanted to shoot I'll just call it James Bond-esque film in one of our mines. And I would have never imagined that they would want to film something like that in one of our mines, but we have that set up already. We have the mines that are willing to work with them. But if we don't have the incentive, then we really don't show that we're willing to push back. But just wanted to share that with everyone this morning. Thank you.
Director Schober.
And then just in, conclusion for this and open it up to your questions, there's been some really great storylines and things that we've missed out on that have gone to other locations. And recently, the movie Wind River was filmed in Utah. We didn't have an incentive. They didn't come to Wyoming for that. The series Yellowstone with Kevin Costner is filmed in Montana. And then certainly those that get really close to home, the series of Longmire was all done in New Mexico on location there. And CJ Box, his most recent to that airing now on ABC, Big Sky, is filmed in Canada. And the Joe Pickett series, which we worked very hard with Paramount, Charles and the Wyoming Business Council and communities across the state, we worked really hard to get there. And that unfortunately went to Canada just because they couldn't make up the differential without the incentive that they would receive. And so, but where we would ask for your consideration is if you see this as an opportunity for economic development, there is certainly a large number of local production companies that would like to see this happen because not only could they qualify, but they also are subcontractors for the big productions that could come into Wyoming. Big production companies will rely heavily on what we have in terms of local production companies. And so that would be an important point of consideration. The other thing that's important about having the statutory authority and the ability to do it is the turnaround has to be like that. You don't have time to wait until the next legislative session to talk to you about, should we do this? It will already be a missed opportunity. Usually the turnaround is at the very longest 90 days, but usually it's within 30 days or less that we're making these decisions when by the time they send out production scouts. And so, we need to be able to capture the opportunity as it arises. We want to be able to continue to build local crew production companies, but they need the demand too. So, we can stimulate demand. And then obviously through branded entertainment and the ability to make Wyoming another character in so many of these features is a great opportunity, not only for the visitor economy, but for a lot of others. With that, Madam Chairman, that concludes our information on the film incentive and happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. I think that's a good time to make a break. Questions from committee members. I see Representative Sweeney and then Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First off, Diane, thank you for your dedication over the last, 20 years at the office as director, and your leadership during the pandemic, along with the governor and obviously Chris Brown and Wyoming Lodging and Restaurant Association, WTIC. So to get it straight, in my mind, I thought we still had it on the books, but it totally sunsetted. And the reason for no appropriation, would this come out of the new funding model?
Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Representative Sweeney, the thought from the Office of Tourism and the Tourism Board is that we would be able to fund this through the sustained funding model that the Office of Tourism will start on. That will no longer be on general funds as of July 1st of 22. So the Office of Tourism will switch then and be on a revenue account that's generated through the statewide lodging tax. And, you know, there will be, we believe that there will be enough funds to sustain a film program based on the history of it.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Director, I appreciate your time and everything on this. I actually have two questions for you. So on my other committee, or one of my other committees, I sit on Department of Revenue Committee, and it was very interesting to me this time, and it didn't get any fanfare, but it was very intriguing to me that the Department of Revenue had completed a study. I think they said within the last 6 months or so, maybe a year, that showed that economic development spending and bringing industry companies that were going to be here was costing more than what they were receiving, because we essentially tax at about $3,000 per household, but they spend about $27,000 was their numbers, and I agree or disagree with their numbers. I thought that was a very interesting thing. And so when you're talking about the film, you're not talking about tourists who comes, spends money and leaves and doesn't use a lot of our infrastructure, but you're talking about kind of an in-between. They're here for a while. They're here for more than a week.
Mhm.
And so have your department had any study that would show us what film, say a production of 3 months, what does that look like? I mean, what do we really, we're trying to entice them here. And what does that cost us? What is the actual exchange there? And then secondly, coming off of your handout, question number 2, and probably more important, was your reference to the Wyoming Constitution, Article 16.6.1. And then you show that it's a public purpose must be served. I don't see that in 16.6.1. Adequate considerations not referenced at all. And statutory authority must exist. Well, statutory authority does not trump constitutional. And so I would read one, and it's A, given the context, neither the state nor any county, city, township, town, school district, or any other political subdivision shall, and then it's 6.1, loan or give its credit or make donations to or in aid of any individual, association, or corporation. And then here's the interesting part that's not in here, except for the necessary support of the poor. Can you make that tie across for me? Because constitutionally, I'm having a real hard time seeing public purpose, adequate consideration to the state, and statutory authority. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Director Schober.
Madam Chairman and Representative Jennings, I'm going to go to that one first because it's on my mind. So in order to, obviously, as you have read, and what this is implying is in order to give money to a private sector business, you need to have these things in order to do it under those guidelines that are set up and the directives in 16.6. I would believe that because I am not an attorney and I pretend to be a professional in many, many areas, but that is not one of them. And if should you decide that you want to bring this and advance it, I think that it would be good to have someone from the Attorney General's office to be here with us to speak to that particularly. That would be out of my area of expertise. And if that would be the pleasure of the committee, then we certainly would work to make that happen. To your first question that you asked, we have a lot of records. We can give you actuals, not even just estimates on the value generated from the production programs. When the film incentive was actually live and enacted, we were required to give reports to the legislature on an annual basis, which we did. Those are easy to bring back up and share with you. And would be important, I think, for you to understand the historical components of what these generated in terms of jobs and taxes and direct spending into Wyoming businesses. And so should you decide to move it forward, we definitely would have a much more in-depth conversation about some of these things that you're interested in knowing.
Okay, Further questions from committee members? Representative Newsom?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Less of a question, more of a statement, I guess, is that there are two companies in the Bighorn Basin that have long-range shooting programs that air on Sundays on the Outdoor Channel and that sort of thing. And they had, previous to this sunsetting, taken advantage of this. So these are Wyoming companies creating productions with a Wyoming theme. And I believe that more of their TV shows were Wyoming theme based, as this incentive was important to them. There's also a company in Teton County that does skiing videos that took advantage of this. So there are local companies doing productions, and they can choose whether they have Wyoming themes or not, but they are employing people, they're paying taxes, they already exist here. And it was an important program for them. And I would suggest that we maybe look at reauthorizing this. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from committee members? Senator Landon?
Thank you. So Director Schober, do you have an idea of if we were to go after this, and we know it's a hill to climb? Actually, in all my years in the Senate, one of the more fascinating things that we've gotten rid of. I have constituents who ask, was Longmire filmed here? What about Joe Pickett? Is he going to be filmed here? And the answer is always no, they're not going to film anything here. So that's disappointing to me. And I share the representative's thoughts that we ought to at least look at this and bring it in front of the committee. How much are we talking about? What would allow us to compete?
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman and Senator Landon, I think I would want to speak also in conjunction with looking back at some needs, even back to the point that Representative Jennings made up. But I think if we put $1 million into a fund to start it and dedicated that, that could last us at least maybe through a biennium. It depends on the size of the production. If you get one that's really big and national, it could take it out, might not be enough. But if you have the statutory authority to do so, and all of our budgeting is done through a transparent government legislatively approved appropriation, how we're spending our appropriations, you all would know what that is. And when we started with the film incentive, there was $2 million put into the account. I said 1 million, but I was wrong. It was 2 million, and then we reverted back $1 million just because we realized that was too much to have in there. We just didn't need to hold that much money. And so, and memory doesn't recall right now, Senator, what our largest payout was. But if you decide to move this forward, we'll come back with that kind of information for you. And we'll have some other projections based on where we are with what we think the proper financial components would be. I think also what we'd want to do is share with you, even to the point Charles was working with Paramount, but they were willing to completely retrofit an old warehouse when they were looking at the Joe Pickett series here, which would have been to Wyoming's benefit. And that was in which community, Charles?
That was going to be in Cody.
Okay. So there, but what you can do is you can have these things that come in where production companies will invest in infrastructure that can be used for other things. And that's also a value. So we'll want to bring all of those things together for you. I realize that this is a really broad overview today. We wanted to see if you were interested in pursuing it. And if you are, we're willing to go much, much deeper to provide you a much more thorough evaluation as you would consider it.
Follow-up, Senator Landon?
Just to follow up, I guess, to our committee leadership. When the time comes, I'd certainly be willing to make a motion or to support a motion. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to reach out to the Attorney General. Representative Jennings brings up a good point. We've got to figure out where we stand on things. But then subsequent to that, it makes sense to me to at least draft something up so that we can look at it as a committee. It's a policy choice, and we make that choice when we see what's in front of us. But those two things, and I would just take a lead from our chairman, and thank you.
Okay, additional comments from committee members. Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So correct me if I'm wrong. What we had before is what we're looking at again. And at that point in time, it was constitutional in what we had done. And so I mean, I totally support it. I think if we would have had this in place I don't believe we had it in place for my friend Flicka at the time. And we totally lost, even though people don't like the storyline, but Brokeback Mountain, which turned out to be a huge win for Montana. I think that was filmed in Montana or Canada. So, which was written for Wyoming. So I would totally support.
Okay. Further comments from committee members or questions? Representative Jennings?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So I totally agree with Senator Landon that we need to look at this. I think just because we've done something in the past doesn't make it constitutional, i.e. 104. And so I would very much, I mean, we all took an oath to this Constitution. We all swore to uphold it. So I think it would behoove us before we move something forward to at least have a legal direction to the Constitution. I'm not opposed to incentivizing, maybe government wise I am, but I like having these people come spend money. But that's really not what's at question here. The Constitution is. And so I think it behooves us to at least look at that. So I would certainly make that be the second to Senator Landon's.
All righty, committee members, just a thought. So I had that in my notes as well. I would like to see the Attorney General's memo, just explaining that, just so I understand how they did their analysis. So we'll make sure that we get a copy of that to everybody on the committee so that you have time to read it after the fact. I don't know that I'm ready to bring a motion to direct LSO to draft legislation at this point, just kind of looking at what Utah does, Idaho does, New Mexico and Montana. I think it might make some good sense for us from between now until our next meeting to model out what we want. I mean, if we're going to pick this up again, I don't think we need to necessarily go back to what we did before. Is there something that makes better sense in this day and age? So, you know, I'm not going to bring a motion, but I think that you have my commitment, and anybody that wants to volunteer to help work on this, please know I'd welcome that. And I look at Representative Jennings and Senator Landon and others. Let's do our own informal working analysis and then be prepared to present those options and ideas once we get the legal analysis. And at our next meeting in August, if we want to entertain a motion, kind of picking, and just so we have facts about money, how much it generates, how much the rebate would be, that then we can give LSO a bit more direction. And then we can consider that legislation, again, assuming that's the committee's will at our final meeting. Does that sound okay to everyone? Okay, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Senator Guru.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I think that's a good idea. And to the questions that have come up, we'll work on the legal ones, but for me, it's a straight business equation. And the way, and Senator Landon talked about the difficulty, what we need to do, at least on our side of the building, to try to get something like this passed, if it even gets that far, is to talk about investment in return. And how those two work together. Those are the conversations that seem to work in other committees that I work on. So I'd be most interested and I'm more than happy to help in any way, but those are things I'll be looking for. So just let you know. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we understand we have some homework to do, and I'll get with our representing attorney and we'll go back and pull some of that up and work with LSO for the some of the statutory work that they did with us a few years back and look at it. So I look forward to future discussion on that. I just have just a couple more things and then I'll conclude my time with you. Just to, when we talked about how do we grow the visitor economy, what have we been doing? We were fortunate last year that we were able to access $5 million in CARES funds, and all of that went out to local lodging tax boards. The only lodging tax board that didn't take advantage of it was the Cokeville Lodging Tax Board. But we reverted back about 160,000 of that 5 million, but that went into, the Lodging Tax Board in Lusk, Wyoming, to Weston County, Lovell, Grable, Evanston, all the, the county lodging tax boards. So that it was just a good program to help them through the summer for their own marketing work. And that's all been buttoned up and reported on. So you would see that. Obviously, we're super excited about what's coming up with the American Rescue Plan funds through the U.S. Department of Treasury. In their memo that was dated on May 10th, this is the only industry that is specifically called out in the American Rescue Plan guidelines. This is pulled down from the U.S. Department of Treasury, and under the guidelines for use of these funds, number 2, addressing the negative impacts caused by the public health emergency. And the third bullet under that particular guideline is speeding the recovery of the tourism, travel, and hospitality sectors. And so we are looking forward to being able to work with partners across the state for the reasons that we shared with you. It isn't just about the marketing, it's about addressing those gaps and how can we take advantage of this together. And so under Governor Gordon's directive for the executive branch to put together thoughts and come up with a laser focused strategy, we're excited to be a part of that. I just wanted to share that with you. And then, other opportunities for growing our economy are just, is going to go back to that, ways in which, we can just all work together and see where we can grow. We're looking at, expanding our partnerships and addressing workforce and many of the other things that we talked about today. I appreciate your time so much. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. I appreciate the fact that you all are champions of the travel industry, the recreation economy. You're all travelers. You all travel across the state all the time. And so appreciate that. And if you have any further questions, either right now, today, or at any time, I'm always willing to have a conversation with you and go into much more depth than what I could present in an hour and a half today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any final questions for the director? Representative Jennings?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Director, so the CARES money or the AR, more specifically, the ARP money, can that be spent to incentivize people coming? I mean, I don't know, thinking outside the box, we give a $50 gasoline coupon to anybody that wants to come to Wyoming, some crazy thing like that.
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman and Representative Jennings, I do not know. We have a list of several questions that we'll be presenting forward to. Are these accepted and legitimate uses of those dollars? We worked closely with the Attorney General's office last year on the CARES funds to make sure that we were all abiding. And so, incentives and different things are part of the whole conversation on how those funds can be used. So we'll follow up with you when I find out. Unless you know, do you know? Okay, I don't either, so I'll follow up with you.
Okay. Further questions? Representative Jennings, I think you get that credit if you get a vaccine in some states, so. Any other questions for the director? Senator Grew.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one question to take off on that. Of the, Diane, of the CARES Act money you got last year and the monies that you spent up to this point, has there been any problem with, as you go back now and audit those funds, any problems, any money you've had to return, anything that was out of the bounds of the rules and guidelines that you had up to that point?
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman and Senator Grew, no, that was good news. And I think that is because we came very prepared. We worked with the Attorney General's office as we wrote the proposal. We did several webinars with our industry, of which our representative attorney was a part of those conversations. So she was guiding the questions in the moment. We kept a very comprehensive list of FAQs of legitimate uses of those funds. And so there were no other questions from it. And it's again, not knowing fully where we'll land with the American Rescue Plan guidelines, we'll follow the same practice. I mean, certainly no one wants to have anything come back on, any of us as we're using these, and we want to use them for the funds in which they're intended. But I think the ability to leverage those for our industry is really quite compelling.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, Representative Knapp.
Madam
and then
Chair.
Chairman Flitner.
Madam Chair, thank you. Director Schober, I just was curious as to what conversations are going on with industry. I mean, we're at the end of May. And one thing I can see as a challenge or even a crisis is the lack of workforce in both hotel, the hospitality industry, restaurants. I know even our Starbucks, the drive-through's open till 3 o'clock and that's it. But I view it as the marketing is great. I love the program. The marketing is great. And it provides a picture, but will industry actually live up to those expectations?
Director Schober?
Madam Chairman and Representative Knapp, you know, the truth is that workforce was an issue prior to COVID. It has been, it's been tough. I think our industry, and I know that Chris Brown with the Wyoming Lodging and Restaurant Association will probably be here to offer up some public testimony, could speak more directly to this directly from his members. But he and I meet on a regular basis, and you know they're looking at some of our industry, as they had to do last year. Sometimes they won't open fully, or they'll stage their opening, and so they're still looking at ways that they're going to have to adjust through that. But it certainly is an issue, and it has been for some time. The ability to bring in international workers really hit another pinch point specifically for this industry, the ag industry. You know, that was hard. And so to the level of the Office of Tourism's responsibility is we want to be working in lockstep with ways in which we can address those gaps. Much as we did with the Y Relocate, is we're looking at how can we lay out a specific hospitality, the joys of hospitality. What is joyful about working in this industry? It's hard work, but there's a lot of great rewards that come with it. And we're committed to using the areas where our expertise lies in marketing to help with that. That's the best that I could give you at this point, Representative, and we'll continue to move forward. You have plenty of colleagues who are in this industry who could probably talk about their own individual situations as well.
Okay, and I believe Chairman Flitner's question has been answered. Did you have a follow-up, Representative Knapp? Okay, thank you, Director Schober. Next on our agenda is the state capitol visitation discussion. I know Ms. Davison from LSO prepared a really great memo just talking about the numbers of people that have been visiting our beautiful Capitol since we reopened after the renovation. But in visiting in advance with Director Schober about this particular meeting, this topic came up of, you know, I think we're all interested in growing visitation in our communities. And so, you know, with the Capitol being not only in my district, but my town, just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about kind of putting our money where our mouth is, our mouth where our money is, rather, when we talk about this building being the people's house. You know, I come in here often. I offer Capitol tours to my friends and constituents, and it's a very quiet building. And, you know, I think that in my mind, I wish it had more of a robust visitation from the public, because they should know that this is their building and know their history of why Wyoming, or how Wyoming started. So if you wanted to touch on any of those issues before you leave, that's fine. And then Ms. Davison, you're welcome to answer any questions or present your memo if you'd like. But if you're happy sitting there, then that's fine too. So I'll leave that up to you. But Director Schober.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. So, you know, the visitation here at the Capitol is a conversation among many of us together, from the Legislative Service Office to Sarah Needles with Cultural Resources, and all the years that, you know, that I've been in this job. This is the most visited man-made structure in the state of Wyoming. It's a National Historic Landmark for a reason. State capitals are a thing. And this is such a beautiful one and so easily accessible. Visit Cheyenne's trolley tours stop here, motor coaches stop here. Anytime that you've been in Wyoming in the summer, you will see, you know, just people roaming around. Then when and at a time prior to the renovation, the Capitol Visitor Services was run through the Department of A&I Administration and Information. And there were a couple of docents that were here. And then when we got prepared and we're doing the renovation, many of us worked together to look at what could a visitor experience be like for this Capitol and this building. And it was, there was $90,000 from an appropriation from the Legislative Oversight Committee, working through Cultural Resources, the Office of Tourism. We went out and recruited different companies to respond to just an RFQ for what a visitor experience could look like as it would be integrated into this building. And there was, I think it was $89,000 that was invested from the Capitol Oversight Committee into that particular design. Since then, we were under the renovations. And then when we got ready to open on July 10th, the Legislative Service Office, which I would obviously refer to Rihanna and her team, really stepped up to make sure that there were docents and that there were people here that could greet our visitors. We provided many of the collateral materials that they were handing out. I know many of the materials also were provided by the Cultural Resources Division. Again, I don't want to speak for other agencies, but the State Museum worked really hard to be sure that there was a connection with their Capitol exhibit and what visitors could experience here. And the goal for all of us in this industry is to see this building be and live up to the potential that it could be as a story, as a place for visitors, and to utilize it as a way even for civics and civics lessons. And I realize that through the session that there is a committee that's going to be expanding and looking back at this visitor, how the Capitol can be used as a visitor tool and an information center and a learning center. And the Office of Tourism has been named to be a representative on that committee. We look forward to that work. Just, you know, when the chairman, Madam Chairman, when you and I were speaking about it, we were just had this casual conversation. We thought maybe it would be important for here. And then certainly the oversight of what's happening here through the program is done through LSO. And, you know, we just want to, I think all of us, speaking from cultural resources to tourism to LSO, we're all after the same objective. And so we're willing to do what it takes, and I'd be happy to answer questions. I know others would have probably some more detailed information too.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify on this particular topic, or if you have ideas of how other states are doing it, or ideas that for our committee to consider when we talk about visitation of our capital? I'm looking at Sarah. Sorry, Sarah, come on up. Hotspot. Welcome, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Sarah Needles. I'm the Deputy Director for State Parks Cultural Resources on the Cultural Resources side of the house. Yes, we worked with Diane and others to, you know, talk a lot about when we were starting to talk about the renovations to the Capitol. How can we make this place better for visitors? And I think a big part of that is getting a visitor center opened up in the lower level of this building. I think that's going to be really important. We see tour groups that come to the museum. Typically groups will book the tour groups to go to the State Museum and to the Capitol at the same time. And so they kind of have lunch or whatever and cross the street and come over here. It's great to see students come through this building. It's fantastic. I think another thing, you know, later today, we're going to talk a little bit about the museum and what we can do better with the State Museum. I do think there's a lot of opportunity in combining those two elements, increasing the visitation to the state capitol and increasing visitation to the State Museum. I think they really go hand in hand, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Any questions for Ms. Needles?
No.
Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very excited that you're going to expand your docent program to 5 days a week. During the session, I noticed that groups that came in when we had a docent there, it was available. It was such a more enriching program having that person there as they walked around and gave them information. And so I think that's really important. I appreciate that. And it was more of a comment than a question. Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Banks?
Madam Chairman, thank you. Two questions. One is there anything, sort of a tangent, I suppose, but on all of the artwork that's in the Capitol and who they are, where you can see it? Obviously, there's a lot in private offices that's not accessible. And then the other question is, and I think I know the answer is no, but has there been any wish to look at hosting, allowing weddings, those kind of private events in the Capitol? That's huge in other capitals. I know it comes with a lot of headaches, but that may be a potential market that we are missing out on, so to speak.
Anyone at the dais want to take a crack at those?
Madam
Ms. Needles?
I would say that we haven't talked about weddings in the Capitol, but we have talked about doing events, kind of pay-to-play events in the State Museum before. And I don't know if there's a reason why we couldn't sort of expand that discussion. to the Capitol as well. We certainly haven't gone there, but it's something we can certainly talk about. In terms of the artwork, and this is the first time I've been in a meeting since that painting has been hanging in here. These are all Minerva Teicherts, and sadly, they were kind of hidden away in our storage until the Capitol was renovated, and I'm thrilled to see they're up. And so lots of legislators have asked me, and including our co-chair moment today, have asked about the artwork and how do we access that. We don't have a big artwork collection in the State Museum. Pretty much all of the pieces that you see in here, except for in the legislative meeting rooms, which are LSO's property, are from the State Museum, and we do bring those over. We do have pieces that we bring into leadership offices occasionally. And we do have a program where we allow other programs like the Office of Tourism to access artwork that is purchased by the State Museum through a specific program that we have. And it's all Wyoming artwork. So I'd be happy to follow up with you on that if you are interested in hearing more.
Okay, Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So my question is, it seems to me a couple of years ago, Chairman Harshman, or Speaker Harshman at the time, really advocated for additional money to finish out the visitor. And I'm trying to remember in this last budget session, if there were additional monies for wayfinding and to build the visitor center finally out.
Ms. Davidson.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's nice to see you, Rihanna Davidson with LSO, the Visitor Services Manager, and you are correct, Representative Sweeney. So this past session, you passed the CapCon bill that appropriated funds to do wayfinding and interpretive. And so as Director Schoberg had mentioned, that is just in the process of getting up and running. So for your guys' knowledge, there's 3 members of the SBC that's appointed. And then 3 members of the legislature. So a member from the House, a member from the Senate, and then a joint member that's appointed by membership, or excuse me, by Management Council. So at this point in time, it's my understanding that we're still waiting for the appointments on the legislative side. The appointments have been made from SBC, from the governor. And as Diane noted, it's in collaboration with the Legislative Service Office, the Construction Management Division, State Parks and Cultural Resources is in the Office of Tourism, to collectively work on this interpretive and wayfinding plan. So what Ms. Schoberg was referencing is during the Oversight Committee back in 2015, an RFQ and a design plan was created. At that time, there was no funding to finish that out. So an appropriation has been funded, and there may be some more opportunity to use some of those ARP funds to fund the entire scope of the project. So it's my understanding, I think 2 million has been appropriated. I think originally the plan was for 4 million, but that really does increase wayfinding, physical wayfinding outside of the building, internally wayfinding, interpretive exhibits, and that really is what is missing currently in the building. As you guys have experienced, there's just not a lot of additional facilitation for a visitor to walk through. One thing that I did work on this past session, and I'm not sure if you guys have had the opportunity to see, is collaboratively worked with PBS to create a virtual Capitol tour video. And so there are signs throughout the building where you can scan use your phone and scan a QR code. And then, for example, if you're in the chambers, it plays about a 30-second clip about the chambers, or if you're in the governor's space, it plays 40 seconds. So that entirety length of that video is 15 minutes. So that was kind of a safe way to continue the messaging about the Capitol experience while we were still dealing with COVID.
Okay, further questions? Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I noticed during this session, because we were here at a different time period, there were actually people here families here on spring break from other states, which amazed me. And I've got family there at the Tetons right now, but we'll be here tomorrow afternoon So can I hook up with somebody as far as the tours? But that's great news on the wayfinding, and no, I was not aware of the PBS portion. I think that's all terrific. And to the good chairman's point, it is a great asset. We all realize it. I think our visitation, now that hopefully the pandemic's behind us, we'll get back up there. So
Wouldn't you agree, panelists? Okay, further questions? Senator Landon, then Senator Grew.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just quickly, thank you for your efforts on both fronts. Just so I understand where we are at with some things. Some of this artwork, I thought in the old days that we used to have a description of some kind, which would indicate, what are we looking at here? And so that's a piece of the question that I have, and that probably goes over here. The one over here is, did I understand you to say that we still have some collections over in the State Museum that could adorn a wall like that? And if so, I would just advocate that we do everything we can to keep moving to get some of this stuff out of storage and up where people can see it. So I guess that's a two-pronged question, Madam Chairman.
Okay,
Thank you.
anyone who wants to tackle that question?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Senator Landon. So a lot of these decisions that you're seeing about the artwork was made by the Oversight Committee. And there was an analysis done with MoCA at the time, who was the project managers, and they put together an artwork recommendation and collaborated with State Parks and Cultural Resources and did an assessment of what art was available and what would be appropriate, I would say, for certain pieces within the Capitol building. And so they made a recommendation. So what you see today is kind of where things were last left with the Oversight Committee. And as Sarah mentioned, these tight grip pieces were hung this interim. One area that I think I would draw some attention to is that Capitol extension area down outside of the public meeting rooms. We've been working with Sarah and Kevin with the State Museum to get some kind of rotating exhibits down there. And so if you saw this past session, there are the black and white prints. The previous session was the Capitol, I'm going to get this right, Governor's exhibit. It has a different artwork. So the point of that is that's kind of where you would see more, the long-term vision, I guess, at the time is that's where you'd see rotating exhibits. And what you see in these spaces are more permanent exhibits. And so at this time, that's where oversight ended. Some of that discretion went to Management Council about and then really we still have the Legislative Tech and Facilities Committee that would maybe oversee any kind of other additional projects. And to your point about communications of artwork, literature, you are right. We used to have a composite narrative where you could pick up a brochure and it could say, where are the composites within the building. So all of that we are in the process of still creating and hope to integrate that with the wayfinding, the digital wayfinding and the interpretive wayfinding. We were just getting going on everything and then COVID hit and then we had a special session and you understand the world we've been in since we've opened the building. So those are all items that are on our radar and intend to produce in the future.
Follow-up question, Senator Landon?
Madam Chairman, I would just say anything that our committee can do to help you break through what sounded like quite a bit of bureaucracy there. I'm not on the Management Council anymore, but I know somebody who is. And, if we can get anything out of the way or help in any way, I hope you'll let us know what that is. Thank you for that.
Thanks. And I actually think right now the vehicle, the most appropriate committee is going to be this Capital Preservation Subcommittee. That I think is the vehicle that's in place through the CapCon bill through legislation. It just, as I said, I don't think we haven't gotten the legislative appointments from leadership yet.
Thank you. And LSO, if you wouldn't mind just making a note to remind my co-chair and I, so we can follow up with leadership and just kind of get a sense of when they're going to make those appointments and who. So we can share that information about who's been selected. Senator Grew.
Madam Chair, just a quick comment to an earlier question from Representative Banks. There were a lot of discussions about private use. There were kind of informal discussions when the building was first getting open at Management Council, and I know the other committees have talked about it. First problem is this building has a lot of different masters, different floors are run by different branches of the government. Second, at first it was so clean and nice, nobody wanted to spill food on the floor. Third was the question of once you start, where do you stop? And it came down to public groups, private groups, maybe some political groups using the building. What was the use? What were the uses for? What would be appropriate? What wouldn't? And that kind of just, it all started to filter away from there. So it's kind of it kind of was a question that's going to be determined by others at other points, but there have been many discussions about it up to now. So just to let you know.
Okay. Co-Chairwoman Flitner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And Sarah, if you could just touch briefly on, I had asked you a question about the copyright on a lot of the artwork, like specifically the Tykert paintings. If you could just update the committee on that, because I was just thinking, I was just telling Chairman Ellis, these pieces look so contemporary, but they are not. And I would love to have a print. And that was where our discussion jumped off. So if you could just follow up. Thank you.
Ms. Needles.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Madam Co-Chair. In terms of copyright on almost all of the pieces that we have, we don't own copyright on them. I think that we don't own copyright on these pieces. But it's something that I don't know what our opportunities are to work through and get copyright on pieces, but I certainly understand the desire to, in terms of funding things like visitor centers and hiring docents, it'd be wonderful to have some sort of revenue stream to bring in funding, like selling, pieces, or not selling the pieces themselves, but obviously copies of those pieces. So we typically don't have copyright on those when they're attained. They're usually, these, for example, they're donations to the museum.
Okay. Thank you, ladies. We appreciate it. With that, I think we'll close that portion, but now we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone physically in the room that would like to testify? We have Mr. Brown, and then on the Zoom, I see we have one person. Is there anyone else online that would like to testify during public comment?
Madam Chairwoman, just Mr. Box.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll hear from Mr. Brown and then Mr. Box. Mr. Brown, if you'd like to make them now, that would be fine if you want to wait until then. And certainly as we're working on getting more information between now and our next meeting, we would invite you and welcome you in those discussions if you'd like to participate.
Okay. It's running a little bit late, but I did want to come before you all.
pardon me. I speak loudly, obviously, by virtue, so. Pardon me, I typically take the yelling approach to conversations, so I apologize to those of you that I have phone conversations with as well while I'm here publicly. So Madam Chairman, I just wanted to make those comments to underscore your point, Representative, but that's a huge issue for us right now. We're all hands on deck working on it, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to lessen that curve to the greatest extent possible, as we're really anticipating a strong tourism season this summer. So Madam Chairwoman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Mr. Brown, I have one briefly. I'm with you and visiting with business owners in my community. I think there's somewhat of a thinking and a hope that when school gets out, you might have a workforce in high school kids and college kids that are available. Do you have any kind of thoughts or comments of whether or not that's a realistic hope? Or is that just us kind of wishfully thinking that maybe they'll help meet those workforce needs?
Chairwoman Ellis, that's a great question. And yeah, I think that probably will, again, be one step in the right direction. When I ran a restaurant here in town for 10 years, I had lots of high school and college students work for me, and they really benefited from it because of the flexible nature of schedules and having extra cash in their pocket and being able to work around their school schedule. I think that will be a step in the right direction, but I think we've got a ways to go.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Brown, thank you. We'll be in touch as we start working on the more particulars of the film incentive concept. With that, Mr. Box, please identify yourself for the record.
Madam Chairman and members of the committee, I'm CJ Box. I'm the chairman of the Wyoming Tourism Board, but I'm here testifying on behalf of me. I'm the author of 28 novels, most of which are set in Wyoming. I'm currently an executive producer of Big Sky, which just wrapped up the season 1 on ABC. It's happily been renewed for season 2. An executive producer, for those who might be wondering, my job is to provide the source material, meaning the books, and then to cash the checks when the shows air. That's about all my involvement. But I do have some insight now that I didn't have even a year ago in regard to how this process works. And Big Sky, which is set in Montana, was filmed in Vancouver. I do know that they had a $7 million on the ground budget. They employed 300 employees for 5 months. The show has turned out to be quite the showcase for British Columbia, for sure. And I've just found out yesterday it will move its location to New Mexico in 2022. The show that I'm really excited about and a little bit heartbroken about is the Joe Pickett series based on the Wyoming game warden that I've written about for 21 novels. That is shooting right now in Calgary. It'll air as a Spectrum original starting this next fall. It'll also be available on Paramount Plus, Amazon Prime, and lots of other streaming services. Joe Pickett, the series, is going to do what the books did, and that is go book by book into every corner of Wyoming as they follow the series. I know that the books have generated both tourism and relocation to Wyoming. I can only imagine what the television series will do. It broke my heart that they did not choose to film in Wyoming because we did not have a film incentive program. I know that specifically because they told me. And because there were some questions earlier about budgets and employees. I know for a fact that the Joe Pickett series is spending $5 million on the ground in Calgary to recreate a small Wyoming community for the screen. And that includes, most of that money is for construction and set design. They're hiring 80 crew members, and they're budgeted to use 10,500 hotel nights for the length of the production. It'll go on for 5 months. They're building production facilities that can later be used by other TV shows. I know that if an out-of-state manufacturing company wanted to move to Wyoming and build a $5 million facility and employ 300 people, every government in Wyoming would want to pursue them. This is no different. And I also know that I followed very closely when the last film incentive program was defeated 2 years ago, failed 30-27. When people ask me why the Joe Pickett series is not filmed in Wyoming, I say, talk to your legislator and ask them why not. Because there was no money attached to the budget, but it lost. And I keep with me the list of all the people who voted aye and nay, and that includes a couple of you in the room. So I would urge you to support the program and create a new industry in Wyoming, and entertain any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Box? Co-Chairwoman Flintner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Box, thank you very much for your testimony. Do you have any, do you have a dollar figure on what Canada has given in terms of a rebate for their incentive program for that particular series?
Mr. Box?
Representative Flintner, no, I don't know. I don't know the specifics on the Canadian incentive program. I know that television shows relocated in Canada for a couple of reasons this last year. One is the film incentive program that they have, but the other is that the Canadian Film Commission made an effort to create a kind of COVID bubble for every production that was going there, meaning daily testing, on-site medical staff, all these things to make it easy for productions to move there. But what I'm hearing is that that's also creating a lot of problems. Canada is creating a lot of problems for its own industry, because in order for an actor, crew member, anybody to go there, including me, but I've never visited the set, you have to quarantine for 14 days in a government approved hotel before you can move about the country. So that is starting to chase productions out of Canada. That's why the Big Sky is going to film in New Mexico next year, not Canada. So we have another opportunity there. I don't know the specifics of every state and every province and what their incentives are. I think Diane and Charles might be able to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Box? Representative Hunt?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Box, do you know in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years since we basically killed the incentives that were in place, have there been any television shows or any movies that have been filmed in Wyoming?
Mr. Box?
Representative Hunt, Charles could ask that question. I'm not aware of any. I do know specifically with Paramount and the Joe Pickett show that they reached out to Wyoming as the very first location before looking at any other ones. We weren't able to provide it, although the communities were very enthusiastic, everybody worked together. Without a film incentive program, they moved on. And I'm not aware of any other productions in Wyoming.
Follow-up questions, Representative Hunt?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Okay, thank you. So along those lines as well, and obviously New Mexico having been a popular location over the last, I don't know, decade for filming television shows, not just like Longmire and those set in Wyoming, but Breaking Bad, so on and so forth, which I guess was set in New Mexico. But anyway, have other states enhanced their incentives in the past 5 years or thereabouts, roughly in the same time frame that we took ours away, that would provide higher competition against Wyoming for, as reasons for production companies to go elsewhere?
Mr. Box?
Representative Hunt, I'm not sure I'm not an expert in film incentive programs, state by state, province by province. So I'm afraid I can't answer your question well. I do know that the incentive program that was in Wyoming did attract production previously. And I know that there's some advantages in shooting in Wyoming that are not part of the film incentive program with low taxes and very, eager locals there to help. But I can't answer, individually who has improved their programs or not.
Okay, further questions for Mr. Box? Seeing none, there's no one else online. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify? Seeing none, public comments closed. Before we move to our break and our next topic, can I just get a quick poll of members that want to maybe be on a little working group to kind of explore some of the options for film incentive? Are there members that would like to do that? Let me just make a list. We've got Newsom, Banks, Winters, Jennings, Sweeney, Haroldson, Hunt. Anyone else? Okay. A lot of enthusiastic House members. I'll put myself on the list so you have someone from the Senate engaged. We'll put together a small work group. We'll reach out to the Department of Tourism, Mr. Brown, Mr. Box, if you provide your contact information to LSO, we'll loop you into those conversations as well. And hopefully we'll come back to our August meeting with some robust options for us to consider as a committee. With that, we're going to take a break until we're only 5 minutes. We've got a break for about 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:45. Representative Flitner was kind enough to buy donuts from my favorite donut shop in Cheyenne. So please feel free to enjoy a donut. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, we're resuming our first day of the TRW committee meeting. Next on our agenda is receiving an update from State Parks and Cultural Resources. We'll have Director Westby provide a quick overview of his presentation, and then he'll also be introducing one of our presenters named Chris Castillion, who drove up from Colorado. Chris is the Executive Director of GOCO, which stands for Great Outdoors Colorado. And Chris is a friend of mine who I've known for a lot of years. And really, the purpose of his testimony is to get our committee thinking about just different models that states have adopted to support their outdoor recreation opportunities for their citizens and their tourism economies. I want to be very clear with the committee, in no way, shape, or form am I advocating that Wyoming do what Colorado do. It's really more of an exercise for us to start thinking differently and maybe coming up with our own ideas of how we can further support our outdoor recreation and other opportunities for our community. So when you listen to his testimony, I just wanted to be clear about that. So with that, Director Westby, please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis. Darren Westby, I'm the Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources. It's great to see you all in person. It feels like a very, very long time, and it has been a very long time since I've been personally in front of you. It feels like a year ago, but it was only probably 5 months ago that I was able to get the co-chairs to gather you all together for a quick agency 101 before you started the session. And I really want to thank you all for taking the time to join us for that 1 hour. And that was a fire hose learning session, but I really appreciated the attentiveness and the engagement throughout that meeting, because it really set the stage for the lack of potential relationship building for the next 6 months that we lost through COVID and through the session. But I really appreciate you guys taking that time and having the ability to learn a little bit more about the agency. So on my agency overview today, I'm not going to go as deep as what we did in that January meeting, because I think that would be foolish of our time. But I think I do want to just go back through and just give a very big highlight with the agency. Our mission for State Parks and Cultural Resources is to impact communities and enrich lives. So everything that our agency does, everything that our staff do is geared towards making sure that our communities in which we serve or are adjacent to are being impacted every time, or our products and wherever those products are. If we can enrich somebody's life, we are being mission successful. And so it's everything. I'm sitting here listening to Director Schober talk to you, and a lot of the questions that were coming out, I so badly wanted to say, yes, me too. Yes, me too. Because it is just impressive and exciting time to be in Wyoming, to have the abundance of products that we currently have and the abundance of potential projects that are products that you all mentioned. You know, what ifs. We've had the opportunity over the last 2-3 years to really engage our staff into thinking, getting outside that box of fiscally conservative, which I know that's scary to most, but that's how my staff work, which I'm very proud of. But when you start thinking about vision, and you start thinking about growth, and you start thinking about excitement of what the state could be in the tourism and outdoor industry and the cultural industry, we've got to get a little bit out of that scared body of, we got to be careful. And so very, very fortunate to have the team that I have that really stepped out of the box over the last couple of years and really embraced the potential growth, the potential ideas of where we could take Wyoming, knowing very well that we have the ability to grow. The agency has the ability to grow, not only internally, but growth of our products throughout the entire state to shine in every one of your communities, and selfishly, hopefully get me some revenue that will help me address some of the funding issues that we have. But more importantly, to go back to our mission to be impactful to those communities and get that economic impact to really grow those communities organically. And yes, I would love to have more state taxes come into the state because of the products in which we are providing. So all of that with the mission and the vision and the excitement, our agency has 3 divisions. The administration division, in which I oversee, has human relations, it has accounting, and it has the information office. Then we have the cultural resource division that Sarah oversees. that has the State Museum, SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, State Archaeologist, the State Archives, the Wyoming Arts Council, the Cultural Trust Fund. That's the cultural resource side of the house, State Archaeologist. Sorry, I missed one. Then on the park side, we have all of the state parks, all of the historic sites. We have all of the trails, both motorized and non-motorized. And then we also have the Office of Outdoor Recreation, which is kind of an all-encompassing enterprise statewide, border to border, trying to get a handle on things. And he's been, Chris, who I'll introduce here in a bit, has been out into a lot of your communities trying to gather, similar to what Diane's doing with the Wyoming Best program, to really get those collaboratives, the local people thinking about the excitement and the what ifs. And I know a lot of you have been a part of those organizations. You talked a little bit about SWAT. We had BBORC up in the north. And there's several others that are just exciting to get people talking about the possibilities of where we can take this state. And anyway, that's kind of the nutshell of the agency. If nothing else, at the end of today, and I really appreciate the co-chair women here allowing my agency to have the ability to have so much time today. Usually I feel like we get about an hour or two and I'm cramming as much into that hour or two as I can. And I know it's force feeding information to you, and then we may or may not be able to get some good conversations going, but hopefully today, having a majority of today, we'll be able to get through a lot of that information. Again, I also want to thank you for taking the time to take your lunch, a working lunch, at the State Museum and the State Archives building and the Barrett building, to continue that knowledge of what our agency does. And hopefully we can peel back a little bit of the curtain and you can see a little bit about what the State Museum and the State Archives, what they do, why they're so important to the state of Wyoming, and what they can do also to grow the excitement for what they provide. Economic impact. 2010, we did an economic impact study. It's dated 2010, 2009, 2010. Our economic impact was right around, just for the state parks division, was right around $500 million. Our visitation was half of what it is today. And so we're currently in the middle of a study for economic impact for the entire agency right now. But some of the preliminary numbers that are coming out on the park side, it's going to be well over double what our economic impact was 10 years ago. Not only because of the visitation, but we've expanded products. We've grown our campsites. We've done some things over the course of those 10 years to be more top of mind when people are traveling. We've worked with our partners to ensure that the products that we're offering are desirable. We've worked with our partners to make sure that we're crossing boundaries over what is a state park and how you can recreate through the game and fish, how you can market through the Office of Tourism, how we can develop and build the products in which we have gaps. You heard Diane talk a lot about product gaps. Well, we're working really hard to fill those gaps and along with all those lines. And so that's just going to take that economic impact and the visitation and the growth in tourism and outdoor rec industry and really explode it. And I think we have that opportunity, if done well and done properly, with everybody, not only in this room in front of me, as well as in back of me, working together to make sure that it's done right and done to the level that we don't kill the golden goose, I think is a good word. It's been used in this for a lot of other reasons, but our wide open spaces, our abundance of wildlife, our abundance of just the culture and the nature that we have, we don't want to ruin that. So we want to do it sustainably. We want to do it responsibly. And I'm very proud to work with a great team. And with that, before I introduce Chris, I got a great team with me. Very passionate group. I got online, and I don't know if he's been admitted into the room, but Nick Nalen is my deputy director one of the deputy directors on the park side. He is vacationing, I'll air quote vacationing out in Wisconsin right now. But thanks for having him on. Dave Glenn is my deputy director on the park side. You heard a little bit from Sarah Needles, the deputy director on the cultural resource side. Since I'm this way, I got Kevin Ramler, who's the state museum director, and you'll be seeing with him a little bit later. And Kathy Marquis is our state archivist. You'll be meeting with her over the lunch hour. I got Forrest Kaminga. He's our state trails manager. And Chris Floyd is our outdoor recreation manager. I'll introduce Joe Budd because he's my friend, but he's with the governor's office. So I joke that he's my friend, but he's also one of the main people I work with at the governor's office. And we talk about the team and we talk about everything that it takes to make this happen. It's passion. I think we have great product, whether it's cultural product or parks or outdoor rec product. As an engineer, I was telling Chris, I'm not a salesman, but that's my job. It's real easy to sell our product. Our product is fun to come to work with. It's fun to sell. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to push people across the state and say, if you're heading this way, don't forget to stop here, here, and here. And Diane talked a little bit about the ambassador piece. And, that's something that we're really looking to grow in our system to, when people show up, I want them going out and actively engaging people. If you got 5 more minutes, I would love to talk to you about where you're headed, other opportunities on your trip, and point them in the right direction. So I babbled on enough about how cool our agency is, but now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Castillion, as Chairwoman Ellis talked about, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say. I'm excited to hear about other ways of thinking about funding mechanisms. We've come to this body and to the governor's office several times with other ideas. I think it's awesome to be able to have the opportunity to think a little bit more outside the box, and really appreciate you taking the time to come up, Chris.
All righty, welcome, Mr. Castillion.
Oh, there it goes. Thank you. As Darren said, I'm Chris Castillion with Great Outdoors Colorado. I have long and deep roots in addition to old friends in Wyoming. I know better than to begin anything by saying I'm here from Denver and helping you to fix your problems. But hopefully it'll give you a chance to at least look at what we've done down in Colorado. I don't mean to suggest it's perfect. We still have a lot of work to do, but hopefully it'll give you some creative ideas. And I welcome any questions or comments about anything that I talk about today. So, thanks, Mary Beth, you got it up. I tease Darren because he's an engineer, and I used to work with Dennis Ellis in a company that I would suggest that engineers are completely helpless without PowerPoint presentations and Excel spreadsheets. And yet here I go with a PowerPoint presentation. So for those of you that don't know anything about GOCO, we generate revenue from the lottery, and the lottery proceeds are divided up basically into 3 large pots, and we get at Great Outdoors Colorado the first half of the lottery revenues on any given year. When the voters passed the lottery in Colorado, it was a ballot measure in the early 80s. They were sold the bill of goods that the revenues from the lottery would go into state parks. And as is prone, and I'm certainly not suggesting this sitting in front of a legislative body, but as is prone, other priorities come up, and things like transportation and prison and schools tend to take higher priority sometimes than parks and outdoor recreation. And so that went on for about a decade, and a governor sitting at the time with a former Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar, drafted the Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund Amendment, which locked us into the Constitution in Colorado, which I know is a little bit different than how you operate up here in Wyoming. And so we are a quasi political organization. We are intentionally separate from the legislature and intentionally separate from the governor's office. Our grants are half of our money goes out the door in the form of competitive grants, and the other half goes to our agency, which is now Combined Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. So I only suggest that is because it is a guaranteed source of revenue, and without a voter repeal of that revenue source, we are essentially ensconced in the Constitution. Our revenues grow at CPI every year. So this year we will grant out a little over $70 million for parks, trails, open space, wildlife habitat, a variety of other things throughout Colorado. And I want to just suggest, if there's any questions about my background, please jump in. But I've been in and around politics my entire professional career, so certainly appreciate all the work you've done. I also want to say I hadn't been in the Capitol since you all remodeled it, and what a beautiful tribute to the people of Wyoming You guys did a fantastic job with that. So I understand it was a bit of chaos for the last few years, but grateful as a resident of Colorado to be able to come up here and see that. So we, as I said, we get no tax dollars for our revenue. It all is derived from the lottery. As I said, we get the first half. Mary Beth, you can probably skip ahead if you don't mind running to slide 5 up there. We'll skip some of these just so in the interest of time and hopefully have some questions. Yeah, that one. Thank you. So we get half, and then the rest goes to our Department of Local Affairs, which is a state agency that interacts with our local governments. They grant out money on a per capita basis through a conservation trust fund. So it goes to cities, counties, and special districts. There's a 10% direct distribution. It was to the former Parks Agency that, similar to what Darren is in charge of. It is now a merge agency. So 10% goes to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, but is to be used for parks capital construction. And then if there's any money, I know that adds up to 100%, but if there's any money left, because we are capped at CPI, so occasionally there will be some dollars left, it goes into the BEST program, which is administered by the Colorado Department of Education, and it stands for Building Excellent Schools Today, and it's a rural school district funding capital construction mechanism, also derived from the lottery. Just go ahead a couple of slides, Mary Beth, if you don't mind, to 7. We grant out our money in 4 quadrants. This is important because we have to remain substantially equal in these 4 quadrants over time. And in our 28-year history, we just had an audit, a first performance audit in our history a couple of years ago. And we were within 1 percentage point of 25% on all 4 of those quadrants. We generally have tracked it, but we hadn't actually gone through an audit to ensure that we were within compliance with our substantially equal requirement in the Constitution. So as I said, half our money goes to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which is formed up there in the 4 quadrants as outdoor recreation and wildlife. The other half of our money goes out in the form of grants, competitive grants to local governments and open space. Local governments obviously come in and use it to build parks and trails and all manner of things that are important to their citizens and their communities. And then our open space money goes out in the form of grants to land conservation organizations like the Nature Conservancy and Trust for Public Lands, as well as to local governments who have open space sales taxes or other revenue opportunities that they have. So what I wanted to visit with you all a little bit about today is our partnership with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Thank you, Mary Beth. Talking with Darren a little bit, we are a lot different in Colorado. Our Colorado Parks and Wildlife, CPW for short, is an enterprise. And many of you have probably heard of a constitutional requirement that we also have in Colorado called TABOR, Taxpayers Bill of Rights, which requires voter approval of any tax increase. Within TABOR, there was a mechanism that suggested that if there's any state agency that receives less than 10% of general fund revenues, it can become an enterprise and then not subject to annual appropriations. It still resides within state budget, but is essentially a fee-based organization, and those fees can be dictated by the legislature or a commission sitting in a governing body, and have that function sort of devolve down to that organization to manage and generate its own revenue source. So CPW has been an enterprise under TABOR for many years. And the bulk of the funding that goes into CPW is from hunting licenses, fishing licenses, federal funds from Pittman Roberts and Dingell Johnson, as well as GOCO revenue. We make up about 16% of the total budget of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which is anywhere between $400 and $500 million a year. And I only point that out for your note is unlike all of the other sources of revenue at CPW, GOCO's funding into CPW is completely fungible. There's only one restriction on it, that it can't be used to supplant or substitute any general fund revenues that have previously gone into Colorado Parks and Wildlife. But otherwise, our money can kind of flow between the organization. Obviously, as you saw in that previous slide, we have to keep it within 25% within each of those quadrants, but for the most part, it is generally fungible and can be used for flexible things, as we'll talk about in a minute here, including the acquisition of a state park, which is, sorry, Mary Beth, I skipped ahead to the next slide. We do, as you see on this slide, a lot of environmental education, volunteer programs, non-game species work, and youth programs. On the park side, on the wildlife side, we obviously do a lot of game work, habitat, those kinds of things. and work with CPW, identify those priorities through what we call an annual investment proposal. So every year we sit with them and work through what they would like to spend GOCO dollars on. We get a 150, 200 page investment proposal from them every year that goes to our board for approval. And it sort of articulates how they're going to spend this year. For instance, about $35 million of that fund. Next slide, if you don't mind, Mary Beth. Couple of things I just want to throw out there for your consideration as well. So listening to Darren going, and we've had similar issues in Colorado, and obviously in the last year, especially, we've seen a tremendous impact from overuse, from outdoor recreation amenities from the public. Obviously, with everybody being cooped up from COVID, the one escape that they had was to be able to get outside and camp and recreate and do all the things that we all live in the West to appreciate and enjoy. So it's had a huge impact on not only our state park system, but our local parks as well as our national parks in Colorado. I'm sure you all have seen similar things. But in 2018, after a couple of years of work, again, this was work that we did with sportsmen's organizations, with other advocates that have interests in the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We introduced a bill called the Future Generations Act. It was the Parks and Wildlife Future Generations Act. And what this essentially did, and listening to Darren earlier, up to this point in time, our Parks and Wildlife Commission, and I forgot to mention this earlier, I sat on the Parks Board for a year, almost 6.5 for a year. And then when we merged with the Wildlife Division of Wildlife, sat on the merged commission for another 6.5 years. So I've sat in that position as a citizen before I came to work for GOCO here. So I understand the financial situations that agencies like Darren's are going through, and saw that as we were sitting in 2018, we were projecting a $30 million shortfall for Parks and Wildlife. And that was just if things kind of stayed at the status quo. Sitting on the commission, we were also tasked with the responsibility of setting parks fees as well as hunting and fishing license fees. And as you can appreciate, that's a huge source of revenue for CPW. I'm sure it is for both agencies up here in Wyoming. And the interesting thing is that several years ago, the legislature gave the commission the authority to establish out-of-state big game license fees. And so the commission could sort of survey surrounding states and just see what everybody else was charging for big game hunting licenses and set our fees accordingly. And but the legislature retained the authority to set resident license fees. And so you had this huge disproportionate fee between a resident license, which was about $48, and an out-of-state license, which was almost $500 at the time I was sitting on the commission. Same, similar, not quite as big of a spread for small game and fishing licenses, but it was a huge impediment in many ways for the agency, because every time they wanted to have a conversation about, for instance, raising in-state resident big game licenses, they had to come to the legislature and make the case that $48 was insufficient for their revenue opportunities that they saw for in-state hunting licenses. So with the Future Generations Act, this also applied, for our Parks Division as well. So anytime the State Parks Agency wanted to raise its parks fee, either daily passes or annual passes, had to come to the legislature for approval. And again, it didn't matter if it was, if inflation or CPI was outgrowing that fee, we still had to come to the legislature and get that authority. So we, as a state and as an agency and in partnership with GOCO at the time, went to the legislature and said, take that restriction off. Trust the commission to listen to the public, to set those fees according to what they think is right. It took into consideration, as Darren was saying, market factors. We had to look around at what other states were doing. Are we becoming a dumping ground for out-of-state residents because our fees aren't, able to keep up? Or are our, citizens going to other states because they can have the opportunity to hunt and fish and recreate, for a cheaper price? So it gave the commission a tremendous amount of authority. Obviously, they're appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. So there is a lot of public accountability for setting those fees, but it gave them some flexibility to take into account, market considerations and things like that. Quickly, I'll just run through a couple of things, Mary Beth, if you don't mind. Next slide. Darren alluded to this. We've, in Colorado, it's been very hip and trendy to attract the outdoor recreation industry. We've done a lot of studies and happy to share those with you as to what the outdoor recreation economy contributes to our overall economy in Colorado. And it's pretty significant, $12 billion. So you can figure this is from spillover effects from having a state park in a community, which I want to talk about, can, include outfitters, it can include guides, rafting companies, mountain bike sales, all that stuff kind of factors into this, including OHV sales actually. So it's not just quiet use of our outdoors. So it's a pretty sizable chunk of our economy. And we're actually conducting a study in relation to something I'll mention here in a second that will go in tandem with the new state park that we just opened up in Colorado. But in many ways, and I only point this out, in many ways, it has been an attractive incentive for some of these outdoor companies to look at Colorado and see that it's prioritized the outdoor recreation economy for them to consider relocating. As many of you know, we just got VF a couple of years ago. This is the parent company to North Face and a variety of other clothing manufacturers. They relocated from North Carolina and will have several thousand employees in downtown Denver here in the near future. It is also, the small companies too, small-ish, and I'll talk about this in a second if we have time, but one of, it's called Mayfly. It's a parent company for Able and Ross Reels. If any of you are anglers, these are high-end fishing reels. They moved to Montrose because they were based in Southern California. Montrose is a community on the Western Slope. And, essentially their employees could not afford to live in Southern California anymore and continue to work at Mayfly, which they all did. I just talked to a guy the other day. He'd been there for 32 years, which, in this day and age, who works, in the same place for 32 years, but that's how much he loved the company. So he relocated his family to Montrose. But the fact that Montrose had banded together, focused on the outdoor recreation economy, attracted Mayfly to this particular location. Plus, there was the Uncompahgre River runs through there. It's largely an agricultural conveyance, so it's always got a pretty good stream flow in it. And literally, you can stand on the back deck of their new warehouse and cast into the river and try out their new reels. So all of these things band together. And I'll talk a little bit about why they picked Montrose in a second here. But I want to, if you don't mind, just throwing up the next slide. I'm not going to go through all of these. I know these are all online for you, but just to kind of throw these out for conversation starters. So a couple of years ago, our friends at the Trust for Public Lands and the Nature Conservancy began having conversations with a large landowner just outside of Trinidad, Colorado. So if you are on I-25, it's literally the last stop before you hit New Mexico, right before Raton Pass. It's a community that has had a boom and bust cycle, largely attributed to the natural resources economy, coal mines, coal bed methane. So you can see how, those things go. Well, many years ago, when we made the brilliant decision to legalize marijuana, Trinidad saw that as an economic opportunity, and it began their next boom cycle for that city. There are 27 pot shops in Trinidad. If you can imagine who they're selling to, it's not anyone in Denver. It's folks coming up from Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. And so seeing that many states were beginning to contemplate legalization of marijuana, Trinidad began thinking, well, what can we do next? What's our next boom economy going to be? Because for sure, those 27 pot shops are not going to be doing the same amount of business that they've been doing up until that point in time and in fact, New Mexico is in the process of legalizing marijuana right now. So Trinidad approached TPL and TNC and GOCO to begin really in earnest figuring out what we could do with this particular piece of property. If you've ever been to Trinidad, as you're driving in from the north, there's a big peak that is very prominent. It's the highest point east of I-25. If you're ever on Jeopardy and need that answer, keep that in mind, in the continental United States. It's a beautiful backdrop to this community. It's been private land for the entirety of this city. Nobody's ever been able to actually legally get up to Fisher's Peak from Trinidad. There's a way that you could go down through New Mexico, up through Sugar Creek Canyon and come through 2 state wildlife areas on the east side, but you could never just walk up from Trinidad. And so everyone in this community had been there, grown up there, looked at this mountain their entire lives and never had this experience on this ranch. So this was a 19,000 acre ranch. It was owned by a wealthy family. The patriarch had passed away a couple of years ago. His wife was looking to move and wanted to keep it in conservation in some aspect. And so she approached TNC and TPL to begin those conversations. And, it took several years to do this, but eventually came to a sales price. And so the ranch sold for $25 million for 19,000 acres just outside of Trinidad. GOCO contributed $17 million of that purchase price, Colorado Parks and Wildlife contributed 7 million out of a habitat stamp funding program that they have. So we've got the ranch under contract, and it is now our newest state park in Colorado. And I only point that whole process out because I know Darren had mentioned that they've got some opportunities out there. The only reason we went to Trinidad is because that community saw this as an opportunity for economic vitality, their next boom cycle, as they started to see the waning of the marijuana revenues. What was next for them? So they got together, they looked at other communities throughout the West and said, this outdoor recreation economy is real. It's contributing to our overall, economy here in Trinidad, and we want to somehow enhance that. So you literally will be able to now walk from Trinidad, and if you're in great shape, which I'm not, be able to get up to the Fisher's Peak here in the next couple of years as we start to build out trails for that amenity. Across the highway and down, there's a reservoir. It's an existing state park. So now being able to connect these two amenities where you have campgrounds, a reservoir, water aspect for Lake Trinidad State Park to Fisher's Peak State Park is going to be a huge boon for that community, not just for those of us in Colorado and Denver, because we can get down there in 3 or 4 hours, but it will attract folks from New Mexico and Oklahoma and Texas as well to come in and pay out of state parks passes and out of state hunting licenses. There will be hunting on this property as well, since it's so big. And as I said, there are 2 state wildlife areas that are already owned by CPW on the east side of it. So in sum, it's over 50 square miles of acreage down there that will be open to the public for accessibility down there. Just a couple of quick other things. I know I mentioned Montrose already. I didn't give you the precursor to why Mayfly, I think, picked Montrose. Besides, cost of living, the city and the county, and they have a Parks and Rec district. If you're ever over in Montrose, go to the rec center over there. It will rival any rec center you've ever seen in your life. This community banded together, and it's a conservative community, voted to tax themselves for outdoor recreation to incentivize not only and attract as a local match for grants like GOCO and other funding sources, but they've been a really cohesive community. Almost like 80% of the residents of Montrose are members of the rec center, which is a ridiculously high percentage when you think about it. But there are trail amenities throughout that community. There are parks that all are connected by this trail. And when Mayfly started to move there, they bought an existing warehouse facility and set up their light industrial manufacturing process. And it quickly outgrew that space. And so they worked with this community, with the city, to develop a tax increment financing. I don't know if you have that in Wyoming, where you essentially offset property taxes, future property taxes for investments in the real estate today. But, and this has baffled me as a Colorado native. We have never, the fact that we treated our rivers like dumps for years is still astounding to me. The community didn't even realize the Uncompahgre River went through the city of Montrose because it was covered with junk cars and old concrete that, people had dumped there for years. So Mayfly bought a 40-acre parcel there, cleaned it all up, built their new manufacturing facility, which has this beautiful view of the Dallas Divide down there. And as I said, you can stand on their back deck and cast into the river. But they're now building a distillery and a brew pub and all these other hip and trendy things that go along with this outdoor recreation economy. A hotel will be on this new this new parcel as well. So because of this community's investment in its outdoor recreation amenities, you're starting to see this investment come from other industries and really bolster that economy in a significant way. Last one I will talk to you about, and it's only because if I had a different circumstance, Dennis and I would be out doing a trail inspection at Kurt Gowdy in an hour here, but I have to run back to Denver, unfortunately. But Fruita is a city in western Colorado, the last stop before the Utah border on I-70. For 20 years, I drove right by Fruita and continued on to Moab. And this community got together and said, we need to figure out a way to get these mountain bikers off the highway into our community. So they started to build a trail system through Fruita and through the larger Grand Valley. If you've ever been over there, as you come into the Grand Valley, you'll see the Colorado Mesa on your left, the largest flat top mountain in the world. And pretty quickly this spring, you will be able to get on a mountain bike at the top of Grand Mesa, ride 6,000 feet down to the Colorado River, ride on a trail all the way through. If you want to stop in Palisade and get some peaches, stop in Grand Junction and get some pizza, all the way to the Utah border on a trail that was largely funded by GOCO's investments. And I only point that out because it was a community vision from the beginning 20 years ago to figure out how to tap into the grants that are available from GOCO, to this day, we've spent almost $40 million in Mesa County and the Grand Valley on trails over there. And it's because the city leaders in Fruita saw an opportunity to get someone off the highway, say, stop here in Colorado, spend your tax dollars here in Fruita, buying expensive mountain bikes and overpriced microbrews and pizza and all that stuff. You don't need to go to Moab for the same experience. You can have it here. So they've built this beautiful network of trails that you can park your car, park your camper, park your trailer, and never have to get in your car because it's all rideable because of the trails that this community has built through the investments that they've made, not only through themselves, but also from organizations like ours. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions or elaborate on anything. Again, certainly not up here to suggest that we do it right, but maybe give you some ideas to contemplate as you're looking at future revenue situations here in Wyoming. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You bet. Thank you, Chris. Questions from committee members? We went through a lot of information quickly.
Sorry.
Oh, no, in a great way. I did have a question. If you could talk a little bit about just the consolidation of what your wildlife division with parks, what kind of drove that? Was it budgetary or something else happening within Colorado?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was largely budgetary. Sitting on the Parks Board at the time and looking at the Wildlife Commission at the time, there was a lot of overlap in essential services. There were vehicles that were redundant because you had a park ranger and a wildlife officer essentially performing the same law enforcement type function in many of these places, and that's a very simplistic answer. But it was largely financial, as well as just looking at what efficiencies we could have by having, a park ranger now serve as sort of an assistant wildlife, officer, different requirements, obviously, but, there are some things that just seem to make sense for both agencies to combine. And it was complicated. And I'm sure you have it up here. Two very different personalities in these organizations. You can appreciate what a park ranger's mindset is versus a wildlife officer's mindset, what their responsibilities are to their respective organizations. So it took a long time. I think we are now finally at a place in Colorado where the employees of CPW don't identify as P or W. They're now CPW as a merged agency, but it did end up in significant savings, just from fleets and things that are all, required when you have large state agencies with large geographic responsibilities. So we've consolidated that, and I think it's at a place now where, it's running efficiently.
Further questions from committee members? Oh, perfect. Senator Grew.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chris, thank you. Going back to the recreation economy slide that you've got up here, it says contributes more than $12 billion, to the Colorado economy annually, 3.1% of the state's economy. Then the last bullet, it says outdoor rec resources and community support small businesses and improves the quality of life. Have you had a chance to quantify, $12 billion is a big number, and 3.1%, while not massive, is still improvement. But when you add that last bullet, and that, to me, what I took away from what you were saying, that there's a big multiplier in bringing businesses to the state by this quality of life that you created through these parks. Quantified what that means to the economy when you add that number in, and how that plays?
Mr. Castilian, sorry.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam Chair.
Castilian,
Yes.
sorry.
Thank you, Senator. Great question. And I referenced it, but then I didn't follow up on it. So we have some anecdotal evidence that shows, it can be a 2, 3, 5 times multiplier. I mean, obviously, when you look at, for instance, Trinidad, they don't have a huge tourism economy there right now because it's a pass-through largely. So, these are not, and I came from the oil and gas industry, so I know the differences between the economies and the contributions to these economies. You're not going to replace oil and gas industry jobs with outdoor recreation jobs. It's largely a service industry, but it does take that dip out of the V when you start seeing these bus cycles that inevitably happen in any resource-based economy. So you flatten that out a little bit. And quite frankly, we've seen in Grand Junction, for instance, a lot of these engineers that used to work in the oil and gas industry are now going to work for outdoor recreation industry types. So there's a company called Bonsai Design. They make all these zip lines that they put in at ski areas and all over the place, all over the world. They've attracted a large number of former oil and gas engineers to come work for them because it's a more stable, job. Probably doesn't pay the same as their previous job in oil and gas, but they didn't have to move, back to Texas or Algeria or wherever they came from. So the thing, Senator, that I didn't follow up on, we are actually studying that in Trinidad. So we've got a blank slate. So brand new state park. It's never had an outdoor recreation economy. So we've, as part of this coalition with conservation organizations and CPW, we're doing a quantitative and qualitative evaluation to see what those economic impacts are so that we can come and answer your question very intentionally the next time.
And if I can follow up. Madam
Follow
Chair.
up, Senator Grew.
And I would like to take you up on your offer about that other data that you were talking about
Sure.
as well, because I think that does plays into a lot of the situations that we're finding and say that trying to get across that even though you're not necessarily a destination tourist area, that you can through this attract businesses in and of itself, just instead of just building a business park.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Landon, and then Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Castillion, thank you. I could spend all day on this. I'm amazed at what you've all accomplished down south. Can you take us back to the initiation of what has become who you are now? It sounded like, if I understood you correctly, that this was a governor's initiative. That kind of impetus is so valuable to us policymakers to get enough traction to get that critical mass of funding support. Let's face it, the funding support really is a driver. Can you talk us through how that came about and what the response was? How long did it take to gather that together and get the votes? Really
Mr.
interested in that.
Mr.
Thank you,
Castillion.
Senator. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, of course. So as I said, the voters in Colorado initially passed the lottery in '83. And, after almost 7 years of revenues from the lottery and not really going into, as I said, the parks and outdoor recreation amenities that, were part of the voter initiative, Governor Romer at the time, who was in his, what would he have been in his third term of 4, probably, brought together a group, as you all are adept at doing, of business leaders, community leaders, legislative leaders, to sit down and say, what should we do to ensure that this revenue source is going to the purpose for which we sold it to the voters? And they came up with the Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund. So our board, as I said, it's nonpartisan. We have 2 members from each congressional district in Colorado that serve on our board, as well as 2 representatives from Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the head of DNR. But initially, it was a Republican and Democratic, co-initiative. There were as many Republican leaders sitting behind and drafting the GOCO ballot measure as there were Democratic initiatives. But it was largely because Roy Romer tasked Ken Salazar at the time to bring this group together. And I'm happy to share the names of that. And again, not that they would matter up here in Wyoming, but these were folks that ran large organizations in Colorado, were engaged civically. There were, as I said, legislative leaders as well as other political leaders that got behind the initiative and got it passed in 1992. So it took about 2 years, I think, to figure out what the right mechanism was, what the right dollar amount was, and then brought it to the voters in 92.
Thank you for that.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. I kind of want to piggyback on my colleague's question. This committee deals with gambling. We're currently facing an education funding problem. And I'm not sure if we did what Colorado is doing, if that would go to parks. It may go to something other than parks. But I guess my question is, with the renewal or the extension of the lottery in 2002 and then 2018, was there any conversation in your state that revenue would go to something other than parks, given what we're all facing?
Mr. Castillion.
Thank you. Yes, Senator, that is a perennial question that we deal with all the time. And as I said, and I didn't intend any slight by it, you all have very important priorities that you have to deal with on a daily basis serving in the legislature. And, at the time, Governor Romer felt like parks and outdoor recreation was an equal priority to the other things that were happening with the state budget. But yes, to answer your question, every year we have conversations with K-12, with, transportation advocates who would like to reallocate, the revenues that come off the lottery, which is, better part of $160 million a year, towards whatever it is that they're dealing with. And we have the same transportation shortfalls, education situation in Colorado that you all are experiencing up here. The protection that we have at GOCO is it would require a pretty significant effort to put a question before the voters, suggesting that instead of the money going to parks and outdoor recreation and wildlife and trails, that the money should go to X, Y, or Z. So that's always a disincentive for anyone who, is suggesting reallocation of the lottery revenues, because we are locked in the Constitution as it currently sits. But yes, I mean, it's a tough question. And I think our, elected officials over the last, 5, 6, 7 years have prioritized outdoor recreation as a, component of our economy. We created an outdoor recreation office that resides within our state office of economic development. They're tasked with going out and recruiting companies to relocate to Colorado, as well as working with communities to figure out how to enhance their outdoor economies. So it's been a priority for us. I think many feel like it, a lot of future of our economy hangs on the hope of continued investments in outdoor recreation.
Further questions for Mr. Castilian? Representative Newsom?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for being here. I have a question about your interactions with your Office of Tourism, and are you charged with promoting your state parks? Is tourism charged with promoting your state parks? How does that work?
Mr. Castilian?
We have a tourism office, similar, as I listened to a little bit of testimony earlier. It is staked with general funds. So I think it's about $10 million a year that the legislature puts in to the Colorado Tourism Office, and their task is to go out and market Colorado nationally and internationally, and obviously using many of the outdoor recreation opportunities as the incentive to tourists to come to Colorado. It resides in that Office of Economic Development that is one of the governor's offices. So they, come in and obviously have a discussion, as does our film office and some other things that you were talking about earlier today, all sit within the Office of Economic Development. And intentionally, as I said, with the idea that these are entities that can go out and continue to help expand the economies in Colorado beyond, our traditional agriculture or natural resources economy. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Castilian? I just have one more. One thing we often hear in Wyoming is when we try and attract new businesses here is availability of workforce. And so in places like Fruita and Montrose and Trinidad, can you talk a little bit about how some of these big ideas correlate with your workforce capabilities in those kind of smaller communities?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great question. And I'll just talk about Trinidad because it's the most recent example. Obviously, a lot of these jobs are not skilled. So there's typically a readily available workforce. And when there are skilled job requirements, if we're in a bust cycle of a natural resources economy, you can generally attract, as I said earlier, some of those folks over to work in the outdoor industry. But Trinidad has a state junior college down there, and it's been a great program for many years, but they are now with the creation of the state park there, beginning to add curricula to the amenities that the community college offers, such as trail building, bicycle, fabrication and maintenance, a variety of things that will support, a vibrant economic activity that is about to hit that community. So they're anticipating that, trying to get, local kids to go into those programs so that they stay local and continue to, live in that community. But workforce is sometimes a difficult thing because oftentimes these recreation amenities are in very expensive places to live. And so it's hard to have a workforce that's largely service industry be able to afford living in some of these places. And so it's something that we have to think about all the time.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Castilian? Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming up and doing the drive-in. Just in that disclosure, Chris is friends with my husband, Dennis, who's also in the audience. And then I also wanted to welcome, if he's still here, I may have missed him, Representative Blackburn was with us earlier. Did he leave? Well, welcome, Representative Blackburn. All righty, with that, it is 11:40. And so, Mr. Westby, we can continue on if you wanted to start tackling any of the agenda items. We can go a little out of order if you want to talk a little bit about State Museum expansion. As you know, we're going to go over there, committee members, for a tour of the museum, so we can continue having informal conversations about what that project is, but maybe this is a good time to set the stage of what that request is or what you're thinking. So feel free to tackle the agenda how you'd like, Director Westby.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis. In an essence of time, and A&I is here right now, and I know that they got to get going. I know Director Bach is headed north right after this meeting, and if it's okay, could we just hit on the State Trails building really quick? And
Absolutely.
And see if they have anything, and then I think we can circle back on everything that I haven't touched on so far right after the break or at the lunch, if that
Perfect.
works.
Director Bach, please welcome and identify yourself for the record.
And Forrest, go ahead. Sorry. Chairwoman Ellis and committee, just the State Trails program operates out of Lander, out of a building just I'd say south of Lander on the highway. And they're currently in 15 years of a 20-year lease roughly. And the individual that's renting to them is looking to sell. And we are working with them to try to figure out a way to purchase this. We worked with State Building Commission. We've worked, some of you have been very aware of that. We've worked with the State CapCon department with that. And through the State Building Commission, we've been able to get the due diligence report done and kind of look at the feasibility of to buy or not to buy. And the State Building Commission through the efforts have said, yes, if we have to, if we can vote to say yes, buy it, we can. If not, if we have the legal authority, we'll do that. If not, we won't. So anyway, what we found was State Parks and Cultural Resources could not own a building without legislative authority. We own a lot of buildings on a state park. We own a lot of buildings on a state historic site, but we cannot own an office building or a building outside of a state park or a historic site. And so we worked through the AG's office and have talked a little bit with the A&I to try to figure out how can we put this together before we lose this building. This building works beautifully for the State Trails program, located perfectly for access to everything that they have to do. The building was well built back when it was built, and I can't remember the year it was built, but very well maintained. The lady who owns it has been a very good landlord and really loves the program, and therefore she's offered it to us to buy. Our concerns are that if we don't act soon, that building is going to get sold out from under us, and then we don't realize the security in which we have a good landlord and the potential of operating that program in that building. I have really went 30,000 foot, and I know we've kept A&I here, and I guess I would turn it over to see if A&I had any questions or any comments. I know that we have worked on potential bullet points in which we would work with you all and the LSO to ensure that if there's any draft legislation, here's some bullets that we would want in that legislation to ensure that our agency would be able to own and operate and work that building as it has in the past and into the future. From a revenue perspective, we're paying $150,000 a year in rent there. In the next couple of years, that ramps up to $175,000. If we were to, I need to take a step back too, and just sorry, Director Bach. This will be purchased if we're allowed to do so, and the legislation happens. The State Trails program and the State Trails Council has authorized them to start saving money about 3 to 5 years ago to start being prepared to purchase this building. And so they have the other funds, the fee revenue sitting in an account ready to go. It's not a general fund purchase. It would be a State Trails program, special revenue purchase. And so instantly, the program will realize that $175,000 a year savings to go right to ground. There's also 2 renters in there. The Wyoming Department of Transportation has a license, their driver's license service in that building. The federal courts has I don't think it's a magistrate, but they do have a court system in there. They hold court, and they're both willing to rent from us if we purchase the building. And so we will realize that revenue as well. Looking at the business model to ensure that we're maintaining a maintenance reserve and a capital improvement reserve, we can still put a lot more of that money to ground in the state trails program to help build and maintain trails, both snowmobile and ORV. So we're really excited over the next 40 years. If we were to buy this, we'll have another $4 million that will be put to the ground just because of this decision. And that can happen instantly because they've been saving their money to be able to be ready to purchase this building. And sorry, I kind of went really fast on that, but Director Bach, if you had any comments.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm here essentially to answer any questions if anybody had them. Considering that A&I does most of the leasing within the state, I think that might be why we're on the agenda. And I've talked with Darren about this particular building. A&I would agree that this would be something that state parks should be looking at. I think some folks in this room understand that we are diligently trying to get rid of some of our leases in the state. It is definitely, it's a problem in the state. We are 10% of our reduction is with state leasing. So I remain neutral, but I would say that having state parks own this building would certainly be better than A&I or in that area. They're doing it with fees. They would be able to maintain it. We would not technically want to have another contract up there to maintain, where state parks is able to handle that with their services that they're doing now anyway. So I'm here to answer any questions. If you have any questions about that, I will do a little plug for state parks. We are heading north. I'm actually going to be meeting with Forrest at this building to check it out, but also the Life Resource Center. But we're hitting Hot Springs on a little bit of a vacation with the kids or the kid, and Boyson State Park. So I just wanted to give that little plug to state parks. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Director Bach? Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I think Senator Landon and myself, having sat on State Building Commission liaison. So is there not a workaround on this via A&I? Or does there have to be a legislative fix in order? And just to back up a little bit, the due diligence, frankly, has been, I mean, in the last 2 years, 3 years, I mean, they've gone out, looked for other sites, available sites in the region, over to Riverton on empty buildings, and had appraisals done, so the due diligence truly is done. So I guess my question is there a workaround through A&I? They are purchasing the building, but can you administrate that and then back to state parks?
Director Bach.
Chairwoman Ellis, Representative Sweeney, there probably is. I think that there probably would be a way that we could do it. I hadn't thought about it, doing a workaround and having the normal process for buying a building. My concern would be that it comes from the fees from state parks. I would want to make sure most of what flows through A&I or general fund. So I think that would have to be looked at. I think if you were able to get the statutory change, it would be cleaner, honestly, if it came from the fees from state parks and state parks own that building, similar to how they own their buildings on their property. But if that's something you wanted us to look at, we certainly can.
Follow-up, Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I would have thought that State Building Commission, I got kicked off, but so, oh, didn't get reappointed. That's so. So I would have thought that the State Building Commission possibly would have looked at that as an avenue. Darren is, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Director
Chairwoman
Westby?
Ellis, thank you. Representative, they did look at it. A lot of the headaches and the concerns that we were having was we were willing to put forward the funding to purchase the building. The whole point of doing it was to generate the revenue back and to save the revenue. What was kind of the rub at the time was a lot of the revenue and everything else would be going back to A&I, and that kind of not defeated the purpose, but the business plan of the purchase kind of then became a little bit questionable whether or not we wanted to do it from a financial perspective. Our intent is to try to be creative in having a way to not only use our funds to upfront purchase this, but then over the next 30 years, realize a really great savings and utilize those funds to improve the program bigger and better. There was a lot of other concerns with contracting and having to administer and everything from Cheyenne versus having on-site management, control of the building and leasing. But we can continue down, at least looking at that path. I think, as Director Bach said, having the ability to have the statute, and I know Senator Landon talked a little bit about timing and concern, and we're really concerned about timing, but Forrest has worked with the owner, and I think we have a little bit of respite that we can get through the legislative session in hopes that any legislation passes that grants us the authority and we can make that transaction happen. I think she's willing to give us a little bit of time and breathing room to see how it flushes out. If not, maybe we go not the nuclear option, but I'm sorry to ever say nuclear to my executive friend, but go the route that may not be the best financially feasible for the State Trails program. But the bottom line is we want this building. We need this building to be more efficient and effective to put more dollars to the ground. And that's the end game. But thank you for your question.
Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too served on the SBC with Representative Sweeney and was also not reappointed. So we'll have to just rely on whoever's taking those seats in that respect. But this came to us a couple of years ago, and I appreciate the director working so hard on this. There's a number of things that make this really attractive, you guys. And one is, like several other places in Wyoming, property in Fremont County right now is exploding. My good friend next to me can talk to you about that. I think this is would be a really good thing for the state to have. We've got to have a home for our trail system, folks. I've visited the property. I've looked around. Didn't look you up, Director, but it just makes a lot of sense. But process-wise, Madam Chairman, I'm wondering how we go about if we do choose to support it, for example. Do we go in bill form to try to make this happen? I'm certainly willing to make that motion this afternoon when we take it up. And if we do it that way, are we just going to run headlong into appropriations, which can just be a brick wall? I don't know. We have an appropriations member here. Maybe he'd like to visit about that. I'm just wondering about process. If we feel like we want to support this, I want to figure out a way that we can support it in the best way possible. Because it just makes a lot of sense. And Director Bach, thank you. I have visited with you, 2 or 3 times about this too. And it just makes, I appreciate your words too. So, Madam Chairman, where do we go with this?
That's a good question. I think Director Westby might have a thought.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis and Senator Landon. Great comments. I know we need legislative authority to own a building. outside of a state park and historic site. We need authority to administer that building and administer the off-road vehicle and the snowmobile program out of that building. We need the authority to have the ability to lease part of the building to other entities. We need the ability to take the payments and keep it within the Trails program. We need the authority to, at some point down the road, when we feel it's appropriate, if we ever feel it's appropriate, to when we dispose of that property, that the revenue from the sale of that property goes back to the Trails program, since all the funding came from the Trails program. Those are the 5 kind of main bullet points that I think, one, the significant one was the authorization to own the building. The rest of them are just, it makes sense and from a programmatic standpoint would benefit the program. So those are the 5 bullet points that I think we need to make sure that is in legislation that grants us the authority to do so. And I glossed over this really quickly, but Forest works with the Trails Council all the time, and they're the ones that worked with Forest to authorize the savings of these fees for this purchase. And so the Trails Council is still in support of the purchase, and the Trails Council are representatives of users throughout the state, whether it's motorized, non-motorized, equestrian, what have you. And so they're in support of what we're doing as well. So I just want to put that plug in. If you have any questions about those Trails Council members, Forrest is here to answer those questions.
I do.
Okay, Co-Chairwoman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, both directors. And Forrest, so have you banked the money for the purchase price in that savings? And then secondly, what about O&M? Will that come out of that same funding source?
Forrest.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Co-Chairwoman Flitner. Yes, we have banked. I have some figures here. We have more than enough. The purchase price of the building, the owner has set a purchase price of $2.6 million. As of right now, between both the snow and the ORV program, we are sitting on approximately a surplus of 3.8. So we have plenty to, pay for the building outright.
Follow-up questions, Co-Chairwoman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And operation and maintenance?
Operation and maintenance, as Director Westby, tailored to, if we were to be able to take ownership of this building, we would definitely pretty much build an operations and maintenance budget. We would rely on the ramp from driver's license services, U.S. Marshals, to begin that savings account for maintenance. As far as maintenance to date, the building has been maintained fantastically by the current owner. And then I see, this opportunity of owning this building to allow us to take the driver's seat. And as our program grows, we can look at facility growth, what we need to add, what we need to, make better within the building.
Okay, further questions, Representative Jennings and then Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Director, any of you. So I don't mind making decisions on stuff, popular or unpopular with my colleagues. Could you address a little bit more? Because obviously you guys want this, but you've run into the statutory prohibition. Can you address a little bit more on the negative side of that? What have you run into that? Why was this put in place? Why was this prohibition put in place in the first place? What have you heard along lines like that? There's surely a couple other negative things that maybe you've run into. So could you touch on those just a little bit more?
Director Westby.
Got a promotion. Thank you. Chairwoman Ellis, Representative. I don't know that it's necessarily a prohibition that says that I can't own it. There's no statute language that says I can. And so what we're trying to do is put in place that we can purchase and operate this facility. I think in general, ANI has in their statutes that says that they can own on behalf of the state of Wyoming, own and manage buildings. We obviously can if it's on a state park or a historic site. So the other solution, albeit a very long solution too, is to create this little footprint state trail historic site or a state trail state park. And then that kind of eliminates that need. But we felt that going the statute route of granting us the authority to own this one building on this piece of property is the cleanest and probably the most upfront way of doing that. So I'm not aware of any prohibitions that says I guess specifically that says that state parks can't own anything. It just, there's nothing that says that I can own something outside of this. And I'm not sure that I have any other downfalls or any other ideas going forward that would concern me with it. Knowing the revenues that are coming off of the existing rents, knowing the program has the ability to continue to maintain the facility in the same level. One of the concerns from the State Building Commission, one of the members there was, you know, it's a 15-year-old building. By the time you have the building paid off in return on investment, which is about 14 years, it's going to be a 30-year-old building. Well, what is going to happen after 30 years? Well, luckily it was a well-built building. It's been well maintained and it's going to last a long time if Forrest and his team do their job to ensure the maintenance stays the way it is. So if there was none of that in place, if the building was poorly built, and poorly maintained, we wouldn't be standing here today to address those concerns. And I'm Representative Jennings. I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, and not being a lawyer or the Attorney General's office, I don't know that I spoke too much on their behalf, but I know in listening to the State Building Commission conversation, the Attorney General's office did weigh in and say, State Building Commission, you don't have the authority to grant them the authority to own a building. That has to be statutory because it's not specifically stated that I can. So.
Okay. Representative Sweeney, and then just a reminder to committee members, it's noon. And so we are happy, we could pick up this conversation about next steps maybe after we eat and think about some options. So with that, how about we do Representative Sweeney and then we'll take a break. And then of course, if Ms. Bach and her team need to offer any comments before you get on the road, you know, we'd welcome that too. Representative Sweeney.
I'll yield to Senator Salazar had his hand up.
Okay, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Representative Sweeney. Madam Chair, so a couple quick questions. What building are we talking about? What specific location of the building? Number two, are you going to lose money or save money if you subletted it from the private sector? And then number three, if you buy this building, is it saving you money in the long run? Some quick questions. And thank you, Representative.
Ms. Bach or Mr. Westby.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis and Senator. Answer the last question. Yes, it's saving us money. Our annual rent is $150,000 a year right now. It's going to ramp up in the next couple of years to $175,000 to the end of the lease. So that in and of itself will come right back to the business. The rental income that's off the two other rentors are more than enough to cover the ongoing maintenance and capital reserves that they have planned in place to do that. Any future capital improvements would come on the back of the state trails program through their fee program as it stands if they need another covered area to store their snowcats in over the summer or what have you. And I'm sorry, what was the other question that you had?
Madam Chair, location of the building. What building are we talking about?
The simple one. You probably know the exact address, but it's on the highway going south out of Lander towards the Sweetwater Junction. There you go.
Yes, the exact physical address would be 125 Sunflower Street, just south of Lander, in the South Industrial Park, and we refer to it as the Collins Building. As of right now, the owner is Kathleen Collins.
Okay. Ms. Bach, did you have any comments before we break for lunch?
Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify because I'm not sure everybody understands how the leases work and how they run through A&I. So what would happen is the money would go through A&I after the first year. And then that goes back into the general fund, which defeats the purpose of what State Parks is trying to do with the fees and get that back in. So that's the main reason. That would be the workaround we would have to do, because I do think this doesn't really satisfy Parks reasoning for having the building with the fees and then being able to use those fees as well. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified, because a lot of people may or may not know how that works. Thank you.
Alrighty, committee members, with that, we're going to break for lunch and then we can pick up, possible next steps with this building. I would notice, or just let the committee member know, this is located in Lander. Our next hearing will be in Lander. So that might work out well for us to, or Lander, Riverton area, that might work out well for us to maybe take a look at it. So we'll break for lunch. We'll be back at 2. We are doing a working lunch at the State Museum so that you can see that facility. Director Westby's arranged for us to have, some explanation about what the museum, what's in their collection, what's not being displayed, just to answer a lot of your questions. I know some members have never been in there. I have arranged for box lunches. If you'd like to contribute $10, I paid for them out of pocket. So if you'd like to pay me back $10, that's fine. If not, then I know where you live. I'll find you. I do have drinks in my car. And so if you don't mind, I'll just have a little station. If you could grab a drink on your way so I don't have to carry that all around, that would be great too.